I stood in the back of the funeral home, watching my husband accept condolences meant for me, and I realized my mother had been planning something all along. The reading of her will was supposed to happen after the service, but what unfolded that day would rip apart everything I thought I knew about my family, my marriage, and the woman who raised me. My name is Rebecca Chen, I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how a single plane ticket destroyed my life before saving it. Before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or if you've ever discovered that the people closest to you had been lying all along, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I need to know I'm not alone in this. And please, hit that subscribe button, because what I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible, but I swear on everything, it's exactly how it happened. Check the description box below for more stories like this, stories about women who refused to stay broken. My mother, Victoria Chen, died on a Tuesday morning in March. She had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and even though we'd known for 6 months that she was dying, the call from a hospice nurse still felt like someone had reached into my chest and crushed my heart with their bare hand. I was at work when my phone rang. I remember I was holding a coffee cup, and when I heard the nurse say, "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Patterson, but your mother passed peacefully at 6:47 this morning," the cup slipped from my fingers and shattered across the tile floor of my office. My husband, Derek Patterson, was the one who handled everything. He called the funeral home. He contacted the lawyer. He reached out to Mom's business partners and employees at Chen Luxury Properties, the real estate development company she'd built from nothing over 30 years. He was perfect, efficient, composed. Everyone kept telling me how lucky I was to have such a supportive husband during this difficult time. I should tell you about Derek. We met 7 years ago at a charity gala my mother had organized. He was 29 then, working as a junior investment banker, and he had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. He was tall, just over 6 feet, with dark hair that he kept perfectly styled and these intense blue eyes that seemed to see right through you. My mother loved him immediately. She said he reminded her of my father, who died when I was 12. She said he had the same drive, the same ambition, the same hunger for success. We were married within a year. My mother insisted on paying for everything, the venue at the Four Seasons, the designer dress, the honeymoon in Santorini. She said it was her gift to us, her investment in our future. Derek quit his banking job 6 months after the wedding. Mom offered him a position as vice president of development at her company, and he accepted without hesitation. He said it made sense for us to work together, to build something as a family. I stayed at my job as a non-profit program director. The pay was modest, maybe $65,000 a year, but I loved the work. We helped formerly incarcerated women re-enter the workforce, find housing, rebuild their lives. My mother never understood it. She'd say, "Rebecca, you have a business degree from Columbia. Why are you wasting your time with charity work when you could be helping me run the company?" But that life never interested me. The deals, the negotiations, the constant pursuit of more, it felt hollow. Derek, though. Derek thrived in that world. Within 2 years, he'd orchestrated 3 major property acquisitions that brought in over $40 million in revenue. My mother was so proud of him. She started introducing him as my son instead of my son-in-law. She'd joke that she should have had him instead of me. Everyone would laugh. I'd laugh too, even though something about it always made my stomach tighten. The funeral was held on a Friday afternoon at St. Michael's Episcopal Church in Midtown Manhattan. Over 300 people attended. Business moguls, city council members, competitors who respected her even as they fought against her, employees who'd worked for her for decades. The church was filled with white roses, her favorite, and the air was thick with the scent of them mixed with expensive perfume and the musty smell of old wood pews. I sat in the front row. Derek sat next to me, his hand on my knee, occasionally squeezing it in what I'm sure looked like comfort. On his other side sat my mother's younger brother, my Uncle Richard, who'd flown in from Seattle. I hadn't seen him in almost 8 years. He and my mother had some falling out over her company years ago, something about him wanting to be made a partner and her refusing. They'd barely spoken since. The service was beautiful. The pastor spoke about my mother's generosity, her business acumen, her dedication to excellence. 3 of her oldest employees gave testimonials that made people cry. Derek gave a eulogy that had everyone nodding and murmuring in appreciation. He talked about her as a mentor, a visionary, a second mother to him. I noticed he mentioned me only once, in passing, as Victoria's devoted daughter who inherited her mother's kind heart. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Every time I tried to think about what I'd say, my throat would close up and tears would blur my vision. People probably thought I was too grief-stricken to talk. The truth was more complicated. The truth was that I'd spent the last 6 months watching my mother die, and in those final weeks, when the pain medication made her foggy and confused, she'd said things that scared me. She'd grab my hand with surprising strength and whisper, "You need to be smarter, Rebecca. You need to pay attention." When I'd ask what she meant, she'd just shake her head and drift back into sleep. Once, about a week before she died, she'd looked directly at me with clear eyes and said, "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I didn't protect you better." I'd asked her what she was talking about, but the nurse came in to adjust her medication and the moment was lost. After the funeral, everyone gathered at the Water Club for the reception. My mother had prepaid for everything, down to the specific champagne she wanted served and the playlist of jazz standards she wanted played during the cocktail hour. Even in death, she was orchestrating events. People moved through the elegant space with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the East River, balancing plates of catered food and glasses of expensive wine, telling stories about Victoria Chen and her unstoppable spirit. Derek worked the room like a politician. I watched him from near the windows, watched how easily he commanded attention, how people leaned in when he spoke, how he'd mastered that perfect balance of grief and gratitude. He was good at this. Better than me. I'd always been awkward at these things, never knowing quite what to say, while he could make small talk with anyone about anything. "Your husband is remarkable," someone said behind me. I turned to find Margaret Rothstein, one of my mother's oldest friends and her personal attorney for over 20 years. She was a small woman in her late 60s with steel-grey hair cut in a severe bob and sharp dark eyes that missed nothing. Victoria was very proud of him. "Thank you," I said automatically. "He's been incredibly helpful through all of this." Margaret studied me for a long moment. "And how are you, Rebecca? Truly?" The question surprised me. Most people had been asking about arrangements, about the company, about what would happen next. No one had actually asked how I was. I started, then stopped. What was I? Sad, yes. Lost, definitely. But there was something else underneath it all, something I couldn't quite name. A feeling of unease that had been growing for months. "I'm managing," I finally said. "Your mother loved you very much," Margaret said quietly. "I hope you remember that, especially in the coming days." Before I could ask what she meant, Derek appeared at my side, his arm sliding around my waist. "Margaret, thank you so much for coming. Rebecca, we should probably start thinking about heading to the lawyer's office. The will reading is scheduled for 4 o'clock. Margaret nodded. "I'll see you both there. Rebecca." She paused, seemed to want to say something else, then just squeezed my hand briefly. "Be strong." The law offices of Rothstein and Associates were in a glass tower in Midtown, all marble floors and modern art and views of Central Park from the 40th floor. We gathered in a large conference room, me, Derek, Uncle Richard, Margaret, and 2 junior associates who sat quietly taking notes. The table was polished mahogany, and in the center sat a manila folder that I assumed contained my mother's will. Margaret waited until everyone was seated, then opened the folder with ceremonial precision. "Victoria Chen's last will and testament was executed 6 weeks ago," she began. "She was of sound mind and body when she made these decisions, and she asked me to read this letter aloud before we proceed with the formal distribution of assets." She pulled out a single sheet of cream-colored stationery, my mother's personal letterhead, and I recognized her handwriting immediately. Strong, certain strokes of black ink. "My dearest family," Margaret read, and hearing my mother's words in her voice made my eyes sting with tears. "If you're hearing this, then I've finally lost my battle with this disease. I want you to know that I'm at peace. I've lived a full life, built something meaningful, and loved deeply. The decisions I've made regarding my estate were not made lightly. I've spent months considering what each of you needs, not just what you want. I hope in time you'll understand that everything I've done out of love. I felt Derek's hand find mine under the table. His palm was warm, steady. Margaret cleared her throat and continued reading. To my brother, Richard, I leave my art collection, valued at approximately $2 million, and my home in the Hamptons. I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but you're my blood, and I want you to have something beautiful to remember me by. Uncle Richard nodded slowly, his jaw tight. I could see him calculating, probably realizing that this was far less than he'd hoped for. To my son-in-law, Derek Patterson, who has been like a son to me these past years. I felt Derek sit up straighter, his hand tightening around mine. I leave my penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side, my personal investment portfolio currently valued at approximately $8 million, and my company, Chen Luxury Properties, with all assets, holdings, and future earnings. Derek, you've proven yourself to be a capable businessman and a devoted member of this family. I trust you to continue building what I started and to honor the Chen name in all your dealings. The room went silent. I felt the words hit me like physical blows. The penthouse. 8 million. The company. Everything. She'd left him everything. Derek's hand loosened around mine, but he didn't let go. I sat there, frozen, trying to process what I'd just heard. My mother had left her entire business empire to my husband. Not to me. Not split between us. Just him. Margaret continued reading, and I could hear my blood rushing in my ears. I know this may come as a surprise to some, but I've seen Derek's dedication firsthand. He's earned this. Rebecca, my darling daughter. Finally. My name. You've always had the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known. You've chosen a path of service and compassion, and while I didn't always understand it, I've always admired your commitment to helping others. Which is why I'm giving you something different. Something that I believe will serve you better than money or property. Margaret reached under the table and pulled out a small, wrinkled brown paper bag. The kind you might pack a lunch in. It was creased and worn, like it had been carried around for a while. She set it on the table in front of me. I stared at it. The bag looked like trash. Like something you'd find crumpled in the bottom of a purse or stuffed in a kitchen drawer. To my daughter Rebecca, Margaret continued, I leave the contents of this bag, along with my blessing and my deepest hope that you'll finally open your eyes. That was it. No explanation. No follow-up. Just a paper bag. Uncle Richard let out a short laugh, quickly stifled. One of the junior associates coughed into his hand. Derek squeezed my shoulder, and I could feel the pity radiating from him in waves. There are a few other minor bequests, Margaret said, quickly moving on. Several charitable donations, provisions for the household staff, but those are the major distributions. I'll provide each of you with complete documentation of your inheritances within the next week. Are there any questions? I have one, Uncle Richard said, leaning back in his chair. Is this contestable? Because leaving the entire company to a non-blood relative while giving her actual daughter a paper bag seems like grounds for. The will is ironclad, Margaret interrupted, her voice sharp. Victoria was very clear about her wishes, and she was examined by 3 separate physicians in the weeks before her death. All confirmed she was of sound mind. This will stand. I reached for the bag with shaking hands. It weighed almost nothing. I opened it slowly, aware that everyone in the room was watching me. Inside was a single plane ticket. I pulled it out, the paper crisp and new despite the decrepit bag it had been stored in. One-way ticket to Cairo, Egypt. Business class. Departure date, tomorrow. Passenger name, Rebecca Chen Patterson. That was it. No note. No explanation. Just a ticket to a country I'd never been to, leaving in less than 24 hours. I don't understand, I whispered. Derek took the ticket from my hands, examined it. Egypt? Did your mother ever mention Egypt? Did she have business there? No. My voice sounded hollow. Never. She always said she wanted to travel more, but the business kept her too busy. She'd never been to Egypt that I know of. Well, Uncle Richard said, standing up and buttoning his suit jacket, I'd say this is pretty clear. She left you a consolation prize, Rebecca. A nice vacation to help you get over the fact that she left everything else to your husband. He shook his head. I'm going to have my own attorney review this will. This is insane. He left the room without saying goodbye. The junior associates gathered their things and followed him out, leaving just me, Derek, and Margaret. Margaret, Derek said, his voice gentle, the way you talk to a confused child, is there any additional documentation? Anything that explains this? He held up the plane ticket. Margaret was packing up the will, her movements precise and controlled. Victoria's instructions were very specific. Rebecca was to receive that bag and its contents. Nothing more, nothing less. But why Egypt? I asked, finding my voice. What's in Egypt? I don't know, Margaret said. But something in her eyes told me she was lying. Victoria didn't share all her reasons with me. She said you'd understand when the time was right. This is ridiculous, Derek said, standing up. He helped me to my feet, his hand on the small of my back. Rebecca, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she was planning this. If I'd known she was going to leave you something so. He trailed off, searching for the right word. Humiliating. I supplied. I was going to say cryptic. He guided me toward the door. Look, obviously everything I inherited is ours. We're married. What's mine is yours. The penthouse, the company, all of it. You don't need to worry about money. But that wasn't the point, and we both knew it. The point was that my mother, the woman who'd raised me alone after my father died, the woman I'd spent 6 months helping through chemotherapy and radiation and finally hospice care, had looked at her life's work and decided to give all of it to my husband instead of me. We drove home in silence. Derek kept glancing at me, and I could see him trying to figure out what to say. We lived in a nice 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn Heights, nothing fancy but comfortable, with a view of the Manhattan skyline from our living room window. It had always felt like enough. Now, knowing that Derek owned a penthouse on the Upper East Side, one of the most expensive addresses in New York, this place suddenly felt small and temporary. I'll make us some dinner, Derek said when we got inside. You should rest. It's been a long day. I nodded and went to our bedroom, still clutching the crumpled paper bag and the plane ticket. I sat on the edge of our bed and stared at the ticket. One way to Cairo. Tomorrow. Why? My phone buzzed. Text messages were rolling in from people who'd been at the will reading. Somehow word had already gotten out about what had happened. From Jessica, my best friend since college. Just heard. Are you okay? Call me when you can. From my mother's former assistant, Patricia. I'm so sorry, Rebecca. This doesn't make any sense. Your mother talked about you all the time. She loved you so much. From Derek's sister, Amanda, Derek told me about the will. That's so weird about Egypt. Maybe your mom wanted you to take a grief vacation? Silver lining, at least you don't have to deal with the company drama. I turned my phone face down on the nightstand. I couldn't deal with everyone's pity right now. I lay back on the bed and closed my eyes, and I could hear Derek in the kitchen, the sounds of him cooking, the normalcy of it making everything feel even more surreal. My mind kept circling back to those last weeks with my mother. The strange things she'd said. You need to be smarter, Rebecca. You need to pay attention. What was I supposed to be paying attention to? And that last clear moment, I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I didn't protect you better. Protected me from what? I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, Derek was shaking me gently. Hey, dinner's ready. Come eat something. The kitchen table was set with plates of pasta and salad. Derek had even opened a bottle of wine, something nice from my mother's collection that she'd given us last Christmas. We ate in silence for a while, the awkwardness growing with each passing minute. "So," Derek finally said, setting down his fork, "are you going to go to Egypt?" "Yeah. I mean, the tickets for tomorrow. If you want to go, I can help you pack. Maybe your mom was right. Maybe you need some time away to process everything." I studied his face. He looked sincere, concerned, caring. The perfect husband. "You wouldn't mind? I'd be gone for—" I realized I had no idea how long. It was a one-way ticket. "I don't know how long." "Take as much time as you need," he said. "I'll be busy anyway, transitioning into the CEO role, meeting with the board, going through all your mother's files. It's going to be intense. Maybe it's better if you're not here watching me step into her shoes. That's got to be painful." He was right. It would be painful. But something about the way he said it, the eagerness in his voice when he talked about taking over the company, made my stomach turn. "Besides," he continued, "when you get back, we can move into the penthouse. Start fresh. This is going to be good for us, Rebecca. Your mother gave us an incredible gift. We're set for life now." Us. But she didn't leave it to us. She left it to him. I went to bed early, telling Derek I was exhausted. I lay in the dark, listening to him move around the apartment, talking on the phone in hushed voices, probably to his sister or his parents, telling them about his windfall. I should have felt happy for him. He'd worked hard. My mother had clearly valued his contributions. So why did I feel like I'd just lost something vital, something I couldn't even name? Around midnight, I got up and went to the kitchen for water. Derek's laptop was open on the counter, probably left there while he was cooking. The screen had gone dark, but when I moved the mouse, it lit up. He hadn't logged out. His email was open. I shouldn't have looked. I knew it was wrong. But I couldn't help myself. The most recent email was from someone named Michael Brennan with the subject line, "Timeline for Transition." I clicked on it before I could stop myself. "Derek, congrats on the inheritance. Brilliant plan. When can we start the acquisition talks? The Chen Properties portfolio would fit perfectly with what we're building. Let me know when you want to meet. We should move fast before anyone asks too many questions. Acquisition talks?" My heart started pounding. I scrolled up, looking for Derek's response. "Michael, thanks. Give me 2 weeks to get everything signed over and to establish authority with the board. Rebecca is going to Egypt tomorrow, so I'll have the house to myself. Good timing. Let's plan to meet next Friday to discuss terms. Don't mention this to anyone yet. D. I read it 3 times, trying to make sense of it. Derek was planning to sell my mother's company, the company she'd spent 30 years building, and this Michael person seemed to think it was all part of some brilliant plan. My hands were shaking as I closed the laptop. Maybe I was misunderstanding. Maybe this was just normal business talk. But deep in my gut, that feeling of unease that had been growing for months suddenly crystallized into something sharp and clear. Something was very wrong. If you've ever discovered something that changed your entire understanding of your life, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Because what I found on that laptop was just the beginning. Check the description below for more stories about women who trusted the wrong people. I went back to bed but didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, listening to Derek snore softly beside me, and I thought about that plane ticket to Egypt. One way. Tomorrow. You'll understand when the time is right. Maybe my mother hadn't been abandoning me after all. Maybe she'd been trying to save me. I packed at dawn while Derek slept. I moved quietly through our apartment, pulling clothes from drawers and hangers, trying to figure out what you even bring when you have no idea why you're going somewhere or how long you'll be gone. I settled on practical things: jeans, t-shirts, a couple of dresses, comfortable shoes. My passport was in the safe, right where it always was. I hadn't used it in 3 years, not since Derek and I had gone to Cancun for our anniversary. The crumpled paper bag sat on my dresser. I'd smoothed it out the night before, looking for anything I might have missed, a hidden note, a message written in invisible ink like some kind of spy movie. Nothing. Just a worn brown paper bag that had once held the most important thing my mother would ever give me. I folded it carefully and tucked it into my carry-on. I don't know why. It felt important to keep it. Derek woke up as I was zipping my suitcase. He rolled over, squinting at me in the early morning light filtering through our curtains. "You're really going?" "The tickets for today," I said. "And honestly, I think I need to. I need to understand what Mom was thinking." He sat up, ran his hands through his hair. Even rumpled from sleep, he looked good. It was one of the first things I'd noticed about him when we met, how effortlessly handsome he was. Now, knowing what I knew, that same face made my stomach twist. "Want me to drive you to JFK?" he asked. "No, I'll take a cab. You should sleep. You've got a big day ahead of you." I tried to keep my voice neutral, but something must have come through because he looked at me strangely. "Rebecca, are you mad at me? Because I swear, I didn't know your mother was planning this. I would never have accepted if I'd known it would hurt you." The lie came out of his mouth so smoothly. I wondered how many others he'd told me over the years. How many times had I believed him because I wanted to, because it was easier than facing the truth. "I'm not mad," I said. And that was true. I wasn't mad. I was something else entirely. Something colder and sharper. "I just need some space to process everything." He got out of bed and came to me, wrapped his arms around me from behind. I could see us in the mirror over the dresser, Derek tall and protective, me small against his chest. We looked like a couple from a catalogue. Happy, secure, safe. "I love you," he said into my hair. "We're going to be okay. Better than okay. When you come back, we'll start our new life." I turned in his arms and kissed him. His lips were familiar, the taste of him something I'd known for 7 years. "I love you too," I said, and I wondered if it was still true or if I was just so used to saying it that the words came automatically. The flight to Cairo left at 10:45 a.m. I got to JFK by 8, checked my bag, and went through security. The terminal was crowded with travelers, everyone rushing to their gates, absorbed in their own lives and dramas. I bought coffee I didn't drink and sat in a chair near my gate, watching planes take off through the massive windows. I pulled out my phone and opened my email app. I needed to see that message again, needed to confirm I hadn't imagined it. But when I logged into Derek's account, I knew his password. We'd always shared everything. The email from Michael Brennan was gone. Deleted. The trash folder was empty too. Of course he'd deleted it. He was careful. Probably deleted it right after I'd gone back to bed last night. My hands clenched around my phone. He was covering his tracks. But I had read it. I knew what it said. Brilliant plan. Acquisition talks. Before anyone asks too many questions. This wasn't just about selling the company. This was something bigger. Something planned. My mother's words came back to me again. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." How long had this been going on? How long had Derek been planning whatever this was? Boarding started at 10:15. I walked down the jetway and found my seat, 7A, a window seat in business class. The leather was soft and cream-colored, the kind of luxury my mother had always believed in. "If you're going to do something," she used to say, "do it right." A flight attendant brought me orange juice and a warm towel. The cabin filled up slowly, business travelers with their laptops and roller bags, a few families, a couple around my age who couldn't stop touching each other. Newlyweds. Probably. I remembered being like that with Derek, back when everything felt new and possible. The plane pushed back from the gate at exactly 10:45. As we taxied toward the runway, I looked out at the New York skyline, the city where I'd lived my entire life. Somewhere out there, Derek was probably already at Chen Luxury Properties headquarters, sitting in my mother's office, going through her files. The plane lifted off, and I watched the city get smaller and smaller until it disappeared beneath clouds. 13 hours to Cairo. 13 hours to figure out what the hell I was doing. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind kept racing, replaying every conversation I'd had with Derek over the past year. Looking for clues. Looking for the moment when things had shifted. When had he stopped being my husband and started being, what? A con man? An opportunist? Or maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was so grief-stricken and paranoid that I was seeing conspiracies where there were none. Maybe that email had been innocent, just business talk that sounded suspicious out of context. But I couldn't shake the feeling that my mother had known something. That she'd spent her last weeks trying to warn me, and I'd been too dense to understand. The flight attendants brought dinner around our three, some kind of chicken with vegetables that I pushed around my plate without eating. The couple next to me watched a movie together, sharing earbuds and laughing at the same moments. I turned away and stared out the window at the darkness. Around our 7, somewhere over the Atlantic, I finally pulled out the paper bag again. I examined every inch of it under the reading light. There had to be something I was missing. But it was just a paper bag. Brown. Wrinkled. Empty except for that single ticket. You'll understand when the time is right. When would the time be right? When I landed. When I got wherever this ticket was supposed to take me. I thought about my mother's funeral, about the way Derek had given that eulogy. How proud he'd looked. How at home he'd seemed, accepting everyone's condolences and admiration. I thought about the reading of the will, the way he'd squeezed my hand when Margaret read out his inheritance. Had there been triumph in that squeeze? Satisfaction? How long had he known what was coming? I pulled out my phone and started Googling. Derek Patterson and Michael Brennan. Nothing came up. I tried Chen Luxury Properties and Acquisition. Nothing relevant. I searched for my mother's name and Egypt. A few articles from trade magazines about her business dealings, but nothing connected to Egypt specifically. Dead ends everywhere. The sun started to rise around our 11, the sky outside my window turning from black to deep blue to pink and gold. We were somewhere over Europe now, according to the flight tracker on the screen in front of me. Getting closer to whatever my mother had planned. I thought about not getting off the plane. About just staying on and flying back to New York on the next available flight. Going home to Derek and my apartment and my job and my life. Pretending I'd never seen that email, never felt that cold certainty that something was deeply wrong. But I couldn't. Because even if I was wrong, even if there was some innocent explanation for everything, I needed to know. I needed to understand what my mother had been trying to tell me. The flight attendant came by one more time before landing, collecting trash and checking seatbelts. First time in Cairo? She asked me in a friendly way. Yes, I said. It's an amazing city. Beautiful and chaotic and alive. I hope you enjoy it. I nodded but didn't tell her that I had no idea what I was supposed to be doing here. That I was following a breadcrumb trail left by a dead woman who'd given me nothing but questions. We landed at Cairo International Airport at 3:17 a.m. local time. I was exhausted, my body confused about what time zone I was in, my mind fuzzy from lack of sleep and too much thinking. The airport was bright and busy despite the hour, filled with people speaking Arabic and English and languages I couldn't identify. I collected my suitcase from baggage claim and made my way through customs, my hands shaking slightly as I handed over my passport. The customs officer stamped it and waved me through without questions. I walked into the arrivals area, and the crowd enveloped me, people holding signs with names written in English and Arabic, families embracing, taxi drivers calling out offers. I stood there, uncertain. The ticket had gotten me here, but now what? Where was I supposed to go? I pulled out my phone to call a hotel, trying to figure out my next move. That's when I saw him. A man in a dark suit, probably in his 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes. He was holding a sign with my name on it, Rebecca Chen Patterson. My heart started pounding. I walked toward him slowly, my suitcase rolling behind me. He saw me coming and smiled, lowering the sign. "Mrs. Patterson," he said in heavily accented but clear English. "Welcome to Egypt. My name is Omar. I've been waiting for you." "Waiting for me?" My voice came out hoarse. "I don't understand. Who sent you?" "Your mother, Mrs. Victoria Chen," he said simply. "She made arrangements before she passed. I am to drive you to your destination." "What destination? Where am I going?" Omar's smile widened, and he said 3 words that would change everything. "To your inheritance, madam." I stood in the crowded Cairo arrivals terminal, staring at this stranger who just told me I had an inheritance in Egypt. My mother's inheritance. The one she hadn't mentioned in her will. The one she'd hidden inside a crumpled paper bag and a one-way plane ticket. "I don't understand," I said again, my voice barely audible over the noise of the airport. "My mother never mentioned anything in Egypt. She's never even been here." Omar picked up my suitcase with an easy gesture. "Come, Mrs. Patterson. The car is outside. It's a long drive, and I think you must be very tired. I will explain what I can on the way." I should have been more cautious. I should have demanded answers right there in the airport, should have called someone, should have verified that this man was who he claimed to be. But I was exhausted and confused and desperate for answers. So I followed him. The Cairo night air was warm and dry, different from New York's humidity. Omar led me to a black Mercedes sedan parked in a VIP area. He put my suitcase in the trunk and opened the back door for me. I climbed in, and the leather seats were cool and comfortable. He got in the driver's seat and pulled smoothly into traffic. "Where are we going?" I asked as we merged onto a highway, the lights of Cairo spreading out around us like a carpet of stars. "Alexandria," Omar said. "It's about 3 hours' drive north, on the Mediterranean coast. Your mother purchased a property there 12 years ago. She's been maintaining it ever since." 12 years ago. I was 22 then, just out of college, starting my first job at a non-profit that helped homeless youth. My mother had been building her empire, making deals, expanding her company. I'd had no idea she had any international holdings. "What kind of property?" I asked. Omar glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "It's better if you see it yourself, madam. Your mother was very specific in her instructions. I was to bring you there and give you this." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope, cream-colored and expensive-looking, just like the stationery Margaret had read her letter from. He handed it back to me. My name was written on the front in my mother's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were 3 items: a letter, a key on a silver chain, and a photograph. I looked at the photograph first. It was old, the colors slightly faded in that way photos from the 90s have. It showed my mother, younger, maybe in her early 30s, standing on a beach with the bluest water I'd ever seen behind her. She was laughing, her head thrown back, and she looked happy in a way I'd rarely seen her. Carefree. Next to her was a man I didn't recognize. He was tall and dark-haired, with kind eyes and a warm smile. His arm was around her shoulders, and the way they leaned into each other spoke of intimacy, of love. On the back of the photo, in my mother's handwriting, Alexandria, 1998. The best summer of my life. 1998. 2 years before I was born. Who was this man? And why had I never heard about him? I unfolded the letter with shaking hands. The car's interior light was dim, but I could make out her words. "My dearest Rebecca, if you're reading this, then you've made it to Egypt. I'm proud of you for coming, even though I'm sure you're confused and probably angry with me. I'm sorry for the deception, but I needed to make sure you came here. I needed to make sure Derek didn't prevent you from discovering the truth. By now you've seen the photograph. The man in it is Khalil Hassan. He was the love of my life, Rebecca. We met when I came to Egypt for a business conference in 1997. I was 33, divorced from your father for 3 years, drowning myself in work to avoid dealing with the pain of that failure. Khalil was an architect, brilliant and kind, and everything your father wasn't. We fell in love that week. I came back to see him 6 more times over the next year. We talked about a future together. He wanted me to move to Egypt. I wanted him to come to New York. In the end, we compromised. We bought a villa together in Alexandria, a place where we could meet, where we could build something that belonged to just us. We spent the summer of 1998 there, the happiest months of my life. I thought we'd have forever. Then I discovered I was pregnant with you. I told Khalil immediately. He was overjoyed, wanted to marry me right away, wanted us to raise you together in Alexandria. But I panicked. I thought about my company, about my life in New York, about what people would say if I moved to Egypt to be with a man I'd only known for a year. I thought about how your father had left us, how men couldn't be trusted, how love always ended in pain. So I ran. I came back to New York and I never told Khalil about you. I cut off all contact. I threw myself into building my company and raising you alone. I convinced myself I'd made the right choice. I never stopped thinking about him. And I never sold the villa in Alexandria. I kept it all these years, maintained it, visited it once a year when I told you I was going on business trips. It was my secret, my one piece of selfishness in a life I'd built on control and practicality. 3 years ago, I hired a private investigator to find out what had happened to Khalil. I learned that he'd never married. That he'd built a successful architecture firm in Alexandria. That he'd lived a good life, but a lonely one. And I learned that he'd died 2 years before, of a heart attack at 64 years old. I'd waited too long. I'd let fear control me, and I'd lost him forever. Rebecca, I'm telling you this because I've made so many mistakes, but the biggest one was not recognizing the patterns I was repeating. Just like I'd run from your father, I ran from Khalil. And I've watched you do the same thing with Derek. I know you love him. I know you think he loves you. But I've seen things in the past year that have terrified me. I've hired investigators. I've followed money trails. I've discovered that Derek Patterson is not who he claims to be, and his interest in you was never about love. I'm sorry, my darling girl. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I brought him into our lives. I'm sorry I made him part of my company. But I've been trying to fix it. Everything in my will was carefully planned. Derek thinks he's won. He thinks he's gotten everything he schemed for. But what he doesn't know is that the company he inherited is worthless. Over the past 6 months, I've been systematically moving all the valuable assets into a separate corporate structure, one he knows nothing about. The properties he thinks he owns are loaded with debt. The accounts he thinks are full are empty. I've left him with a beautiful shell and nothing else. Your real inheritance is in Alexandria. The villa, which is worth approximately $8 million. But more importantly, the company I've been building in secret for the past 6 months, Chen International Holdings. It owns all the real assets from my original company, plus investments I've been making for years that no one knew about. The total value is approximately $42 million. It's all yours, Rebecca. Every penny. But more than that, I'm giving you the truth about Derek. In the villa, you'll find all the evidence my investigators gathered. You'll see exactly who you married and what he was planning to do. I'm also giving you something else, a choice. You can take this inheritance and disappear. Start a new life in Egypt or anywhere else in the world. Or you can go back to New York and use what you know to destroy the man who tried to destroy you. Either way, you'll be free. I love you more than anything in this world. I'm sorry I won't be there to see you discover your strength. But I know you have it. You've always been stronger than you believed. The key in this envelope opens the villa. Omar has been the caretaker for the past 12 years. He knows everything, and you can trust him completely. Be brave, my darling. Be smarter than I was. Don't let fear make your decisions. And if you ever doubt whether you were loved, look at that photograph. Look at how happy I was. That happiness came from loving freely, even if I was too afraid to hold on to it. You gave me that same joy every day of your life. All my love. Mom. I read the letter 3 times before I could see through my tears. The car was silent except for the sound of the engine and the tires on the highway. Outside the windows, Egypt passed by in the darkness, ancient land, new meanings. My mother had loved someone. Really loved someone. And she'd run away from it. She'd let fear control her, just like she'd watched me do with Derek. Except she hadn't run from Derek. She'd seen through him. She'd investigated him. She'd discovered whatever truth he'd been hiding. And then she'd systematically dismantled her own empire to make sure he couldn't have it. Brilliant plan, Michael Brennan had written. But Derek's plan had failed before it even started. My mother had outmaneuvered him. Omar, I said, my voice thick with tears. Did you know my mother well? Yes, madam, he said softly. She came every year for 2 weeks. Always in August, on the anniversary of when she met Mr. Khalil. She would stay at the villa and walk on the beach, and sometimes she would cry. She was a very sad woman, I think. But she was also very strong. The last time she came, 3 months ago, she was already sick. She could barely walk. But she made me promise I would take care of the villa until you came. She said you would need it. She said you would need to know the truth. 3 months ago. She'd already been planning this while I was taking her to chemotherapy appointments and holding her hand through the pain. She'd been orchestrating my escape while I thought she was just trying to survive another day. How much further? I asked. About 45 minutes, madam. You should try to rest. But I couldn't rest. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram. Derek had posted a photo an hour ago, him standing in front of the Chen Luxury Properties building, the sunrise behind him, looking triumphant. The caption read, "Beginning a new chapter. Honored to continue Victoria Chen's legacy. #grateful, #blessed, #new beginnings." The comments were full of congratulations, people telling him how proud my mother would be, how he deserved this opportunity. One of his college friends had written, "Finally getting what you worked for, man. Congrats. Finally getting what you worked for. Not what you earned. What you worked for. Like it had been a project. A goal. A con." I clicked on Derek's profile and scrolled back through his posts. I'd never really paid attention before. Social media wasn't my thing, and I'd always thought his posting was just normal guy stuff. But now, looking at it with new eyes, I could see patterns. Posts about luxury lifestyles, expensive watches, cars, penthouses. Motivational quotes about success and ambition. Photos at high-end restaurants and clubs, always tagged with locations that screamed money. And interspersed throughout, posts about me and my mother. Family dinner with the best women in my life. My mother-in-law, Victoria Chen, showing me how deals are done. 7 years with this beautiful soul. Performance. All of it was performance. I scrolled back to the beginning of his account, to posts from before we met. The account only went back 8 years. Nothing before that. No college photos, no childhood throwbacks, nothing about his past. I searched for his sister, Amanda, the one who'd texted me about the will. Found her profile. She'd been tagged in Derek's posts, but her own account was sparse, mostly reposts of Derek's content, a few photos that looked staged. I clicked through to her friends list. Every single person she was connected to was also connected to Derek. They shared the same friend group. The same college, according to their profiles, Cornell. I knew Derek had gone to Cornell. We'd visited the campus once for a reunion he'd said he wanted to attend. But something nagged at me. I opened a new browser window and searched Derek Patterson Cornell. Nothing came up. I tried Derek Patterson Investment Banker New York. Still nothing. My heart started racing. I searched for Amanda Patterson. Dozens of results, none that matched the woman I knew as Derek's sister. Who was my husband? If you're watching this and you've ever discovered that someone you trusted had been lying about everything, subscribe and leave a comment. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Check the description for more stories about women who discovered the truth just in time. The Mercedes exited the highway, and suddenly we were driving through a city, Alexandria. Even at this hour, it was beautiful. European-style buildings lined streets that curved along the waterfront. I could smell the Mediterranean, salt and ancient history mixed together. Omar turned down a narrow street lined with palm trees, then through an iron gate that swung open automatically. A long driveway led to a villa that took my breath away. It was 3 stories of white stone and blue shutters, with balconies wrapped around each level. Bougainvillea in deep purple and bright pink climbed the walls. The grounds were immaculate, manicured gardens, a fountain in the circular driveway, and beyond it all, through an archway, I could see the dark expanse of the sea. Omar parked and came around to open my door. "Welcome to Villa Helena, madam. Your mother named it after her own mother. My grandmother Helena. I'd never met her, she'd died before I was born. But my mother had talked about her sometimes, about how strong she'd been, how she'd immigrated to America alone and built a life through sheer determination." I stood in the driveway, the key to the villa clutched in my hand, and I realized my mother had been leaving me breadcrumbs my entire life. The stories about grandmother Helena. The way she'd always encouraged my independence even as she seemed disappointed in my choices. The strange comments in her final weeks. She'd been trying to prepare me. Trying to teach me how to be strong enough to survive what was coming. Omar retrieved my suitcase and led me to the front door. "I've maintained the villa exactly as your mother requested. Everything is ready for you. There's food in the kitchen, fresh linens on the bed. The office is on the 2nd floor. That's where your mother kept all her documents. Everything you need to know is there." I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The villa was stunning. High ceilings with exposed beams, tiled floors in blues and whites that mimicked the sea, furniture that was both elegant and comfortable. Artwork covered the walls, some pieces I recognized from my mother's collection, others I'd never seen. The whole place smelled faintly of jasmine and sea air. "The master bedroom is upstairs," Omar said, setting my suitcase down. "I will come back tomorrow morning at 9 to answer any questions you have. But tonight, you should rest. And perhaps—" He hesitated. "Perhaps you should read the files in the office. Your mother wanted you to see them as soon as possible." He handed me a business card with his phone number. "Call me if you need anything, madam. Anything at all. I made a promise to your mother. I intend to keep it." After he left, I stood alone in the entryway of this villa my mother had kept secret for 12 years. I should have been exhausted. I should have gone upstairs to sleep. But instead, I climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor and found the office. It was a beautiful room with windows overlooking the sea. A large desk sat against one wall, and on it were 3 accordion files, each labeled with a year: 2023, 2024, 2025. I sat down at the desk and opened the most recent file. Inside were investigator reports, financial documents, photographs, recorded phone conversations, emails, everything organized with the meticulous attention to detail my mother had been famous for. I started reading. And what I discovered in those files didn't just break my heart. It shattered my entire understanding of the past 7 years of my life. The first document in the 2023 file was dated March 15th, exactly 2 years before my mother died. It was a report from a private investigation firm called Sentinel Security Solutions, and it started with a single sentence that made my stomach drop. Subject: Derek Matthew Patterson, identity verification and background check. I pulled out my phone and compared the photo in the report to Derek's Instagram profile. Same face. Same smile. But according to this report, Derek Matthew Patterson didn't exist before 8 years ago. I kept reading. Our investigation has revealed that the subject currently known as Derek Matthew Patterson was born Derek Michael Brennan in Trenton, New Jersey, on August 3, 1990. He attended Trenton Central High School but did not graduate. No college records exist for Derek Brennan at Cornell University or any other institution. Subject changed his name legally in New York State in March 2017, 6 months before meeting Rebecca Chen Patterson at the charity gala. Brennan. Michael Brennan. The name from the email about the brilliant plan. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the pages. I kept reading. Derek Brennan was arrested twice for fraud schemes between 2013 to 2015. First arrest, insurance fraud involving staged car accidents. Charges dropped due to lack of evidence. Second arrest, credit card fraud and identity theft. Subject served 18 months in medium security facility in New Jersey, released April 2016. Upon release, subject immediately began planning identity change. The man I'd married was a convicted criminal. The man sleeping in our bed right now, the man who'd given a eulogy at my mother's funeral, the man who'd inherited everything, he was a con artist. But it got worse. The next document was a series of photographs and a detailed report about someone named Michael Brennan, not Derek. A different Michael Brennan. Older, maybe in his late 50s, with shrewd eyes and expensive suits. According to the report, this Michael Brennan was Derek's uncle. And he ran a criminal enterprise specializing in marriage fraud and inheritance schemes. Michael Brennan, Sr., has been under FBI investigation for 7 years but has never been successfully prosecuted. His operation targets wealthy women, particularly older women and women with significant family wealth. His associates, usually younger men including his nephew Derek, are placed in situations where they can meet and romance these targets. The goal is always long-term marriage leading to access to family assets or inheritance. I thought I was going to be sick. I pushed away from the desk and stumbled to the bathroom attached to the office. I made it to the toilet just in time. Everything came up, the airplane food I'd barely eaten, the coffee, the bile of betrayal and horror. When I could stand again, I rinsed my mouth and stared at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes red and swollen. I looked like a ghost. I felt like one. 7 years. 7 years of marriage. 7 years of waking up next to him, making love with him, building a life with him. And all of it had been a lie. Every word, every touch, every I love you had been calculated. Performed. Part of a con. I went back to the desk and forced myself to keep reading. I needed to know everything. The next section detailed how Derek, I couldn't think of him as Derek Michael Brennan yet, it was too much, had been specifically targeted at me. Not randomly meeting me at a gala. Targeted. Investigation reveals that Michael Brennan Sr. identified Victoria Chen as a high-value target in late 2016. Subject was a wealthy widow with a single daughter, significant assets, and a thriving business. The plan was to place Derek in the daughter's path, facilitate a romance, and position him for eventual inheritance. The charity gala where we'd met hadn't been chance. Derek had known exactly who I was. He'd probably researched me for weeks, learned my interests, my personality, my vulnerabilities. The whole meet-cute story I'd been telling for 7 years, the way he'd bumped into me near the wine table, the way we'd laughed about both reaching for the same glass of Merlot, it had all been choreographed. There were photographs in the file. Derek at the gala before I arrived, checking his watch, looking nervous. Derek talking to my mother's assistant Patricia, probably confirming which event I was attending. Derek positioned near the wine table, waiting. Hunting. I remembered that night so clearly. I'd been reluctant to go. My mother had insisted, said I needed to get out more, meet people. She'd even helped me pick out my dress. Had she unknowingly helped set me up? The report continued with details about our courtship. How Derek had carefully mirrored my values and interests. How he'd pretended to love non-profit work even though he'd never shown real interest in it. How he'd positioned himself as someone who wanted a partner, not a trophy wife, because that's what he'd learned I valued. Subject Derek Brennan is highly skilled in psychological manipulation techniques. He underwent training from his uncle specifically in how to build trust, create emotional dependency, and maintain a long-term deception. His target profile is typically women who value authenticity and emotional connection over material wealth. Ironic, given that material wealth is always the ultimate goal. There were transcripts of phone calls between Derek and his uncle Michael. The investigators had somehow gotten wiretaps approved. I read through them, and each one felt like another knife in my back. From a call dated November 2018, a month after Derek and I got engaged. Michael, how's the mark? Derek, she's perfect. Completely trusting. Thinks I'm the best thing that ever happened to her. Michael, and the mother. Derek, harder sell. She's smart. But I'm making progress. Once we're married, I'll push for a job at her company. That's when the real work starts. Michael, don't rush it. These things take time. Remember what happened with the Collins job? You got greedy and blew it. Derek, that was 5 years ago. I know what I'm doing now. This is going to be the big one, Mike. The retirement job. The retirement job. 7 years of my life, and I'd been the retirement job. There were dozens of these calls. Derek and Michael discussing strategy, celebrating small victories, planning the long game. In one call from 2020, Derek complained about having to attend my non-profits events. The people she works with are pathetic, he said. All that bleeding heart bullshit about giving people second chances. These ex-cons just go back to crime anyway. Waste of money and time. This from a man who'd been in prison himself. This from a man who I'd watched pretend to be moved by the stories of the women we helped, who'd written donation checks from our joint account, which I now realized meant my money, not his, who told me how proud he was of my work. I read through 2023's entire file. Then I opened 2024's. This one was thicker. My mother had intensified her investigation. She'd hired forensic accountants to track Derek's finances. She'd hired tech experts to recover deleted emails and messages. She'd hired specialists who could access sealed juvenile records and expunged criminal files. What they'd found was a pattern going back to when Derek was 19. He'd been running cons since he was a teenager, learning from his uncle Michael. Small stuff at first: credit card fraud, identity theft, romance scams on dating sites. Then bigger schemes. An attempted insurance fraud that went wrong. That's what landed him in prison. When he got out, his uncle had given him a new strategy: go long term. Stop with the quick hits that drew attention. Find a wealthy target, play the long game, become part of the family, and wait for the inheritance. I'd been the third woman Derek had tried this with. The first was a woman named Jennifer Caldwell in Boston. He dated her for 2 years, got engaged, but her father's private investigator had discovered his real identity before the wedding. Derek disappeared before they could press charges. The second was Sarah Kim in Chicago. He'd married her and lasted 3 years before her brother, who worked in law enforcement, ran a background check. Derek had fled to New York before they could prosecute him for fraud. Both times, Michael Brennan Sr. had helped him create new identities and move to new cities. Both times, they'd refined their approach based on what went wrong. By the time Derek met me, they'd perfected the system. The 2024 file also contained evidence of what Derek had been doing in the past year. He'd been embezzling from Chen luxury properties, small amounts at first, then larger ones as he got more confident. He'd been setting up shell companies and routing money through them. He'd been preparing to sell the entire company to a developer who would tear down the historic properties my mother had spent decades preserving and replace them with generic luxury condos. That developer was owned by Michael Brennan Sr. The whole thing had been planned from the beginning. Get Derek married to me. Get him into the company. Wait for my mother to die. Inherit everything. Sell it all to Michael. Split the profits and disappear. Except my mother had figured it out. The last document in the 2024 file was dated January 8, 2025, 2 months before she died. It was a handwritten note from her. Rebecca, if you're reading this, then I've failed to tell you the truth before I died. I'm sorry. I tried so many times to find the words, but every time I saw you with Derek, saw how much you believed in your marriage, I couldn't bring myself to destroy that belief. I know what it's like to lose faith in love. After your father, after Khalil, I built walls so high that nothing could touch me. I didn't want that for you. I wanted you to believe in love, to trust in it, even after I'd failed at it myself. But Derek Patterson isn't love. He's a predator who saw vulnerability and exploited it. And I brought him into our lives. I encouraged your relationship. I gave him access to my company. Every terrible thing he's done is partially my fault. So I'm fixing it the only way I know how. I'm giving you the truth, and I'm giving you the tools to fight back. Everything in these files is admissible in court. I made sure of that. If you choose to prosecute, you have enough evidence to send both Derek and his uncle to prison for decades. But more than that, I'm giving you freedom. The assets I've moved into Chen International Holdings are yours. Derek can't touch them. By the time he realizes the company he inherited is worthless, you'll be far away with the resources to build whatever life you want. You can stay in Alexandria. You can go anywhere in the world. You can come back to New York and make him pay. The choice is yours. I love you. I'm sorry. Be stronger than I was. Mom. I sat at that desk until dawn, reading through every document, looking at every photograph, listening to every recorded call. By the time the sun rose over the Mediterranean, painting the sea in shades of gold and pink, I knew everything. Derek had manipulated me for 7 years. He'd studied me like a textbook, learned my weaknesses, exploited my desire for connection and family. He'd probably never loved me, not even a little bit. I'd been a mark, a target, a means to an end. And my mother had spent her dying months trying to save me from him. I thought about the funeral, about Derek giving that eulogy, about the will reading, about the way everyone had laughed when I pulled out that plane ticket. They'd thought my mother was being cruel. They'd thought she'd forgotten me, abandoned me, left me with nothing. But she'd left me with everything. The truth. The resources to start over. And the power to choose what happened next. I pulled out my phone. It was 6:47 a.m. in Alexandria, which meant it was 11:47 p.m. in New York. Derek would be awake. Probably celebrating. Probably planning his next move with Uncle Michael. I could call him. I could tell him I knew everything. I could scream and cry and demand explanations for the inexplicable. But instead, I opened my email and started writing. Not to Derek. To Margaret Rothstein, my mother's attorney. Margaret. I'm in Alexandria. I've read the files. I understand now why my mother did what she did. I need to know, what's the timeline for Derek to discover the truth about the company? And when he does, what will happen? I need to know how much time I have to decide what comes next. Rebecca. I hit send and waited. It was the middle of the night in New York, but Margaret seemed like the type who kept her phone on. The response came 10 minutes later. Rebecca. I'm so glad you made it safely. Your mother would be relieved. The truth about the company will become apparent in approximately 2 weeks, when Derek tries to access the primary accounts and realizes they are empty. I've been instructed to stall him as long as possible by claiming bureaucratic delays in transferring assets. When he discovers what your mother did, he will likely panic. His uncle will advise him to flee before anyone can ask too many questions. My concern is that he might try to find you first. Your mother anticipated this. She's arranged for you to have around-the-clock security in Alexandria if you want it. She's also set up multiple safeguards to ensure Derek can never access your actual inheritance. You're safe. You're protected. And you have time to decide what you want to do. If you choose to prosecute, I have attorneys ready to file charges immediately. If you choose to simply disappear and start a new life, I can facilitate that as well. But Rebecca, there's something you should know. Derek has already started trying to sell components of the company. He thinks he's being clever, moving quickly before anyone can stop him. What he doesn't realize is that every sale he attempts is actually a new count of fraud, because he's selling assets he doesn't really own. He's digging his own grave. The question is whether you want to watch him bury himself, or whether you want to hand him the shovel. Call me when you're ready to talk. Margaret. I set down my phone and walked to the windows. The sun was fully up now, and the sea was a brilliant blue that made my eyes hurt. I could see a beach below the villa, white sand and gentle waves. I could see boats in the distance, fishermen starting their day. My mother had stood in this room. She'd looked at this view every August for 12 years. She'd mourned the love she'd lost and the life she might have had. She'd kept this place as a shrine to what could have been. But she'd also used it to save me. I thought about Derek in New York, probably still sleeping in our bed, dreaming his dreams of wealth and success. Thinking he'd won. Thinking he'd pulled off the perfect con. He had no idea what was coming. And I realized, standing there watching the Egyptian sun rise over the Mediterranean, that my mother had given me something more valuable than money or property. She'd given me a choice about who I wanted to be. Did I want to be the woman who'd been fooled, victimized, played? The one who ran away and hid from her pain? Or did I want to be the woman who fought back? I knew what my mother would want. She'd spent her life running from fear, and it had cost her everything that mattered. She didn't want that for me. I pulled out my phone and texted Margaret. I'm not running. I'm coming back to New York. And I'm going to make sure Derek Patterson, or Derek Brennan, or whoever he really is, pays for every lie he ever told me. But first, I need a few days here. I need to understand my mother's life before I can figure out how to live mine. Thank you for protecting me. I'll call you soon. I sent the text and then did something I hadn't done since my mother's diagnosis. I cried. Not the quiet, controlled tears I'd shed at the funeral. Real crying. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and primal, the kind that shakes your whole body and leaves you gasping for air. I cried for my mother and the love she'd lost. I cried for the 7 years I'd wasted on a man who'd never been real. I cried for the woman I'd been, trusting, naive, desperate to believe in love, and for the woman I was becoming. And when I was done crying, when the sun was high and hot and the villa was silent except for the sound of waves on the shore, I made a decision. Derek thought he'd destroyed me. He thought the worst had already happened. My mother dying, the will reading, the public humiliation. He had no idea that the worst was yet to come. And this time, I would be the one orchestrating it. I spent the first 3 days in Alexandria learning how to be angry. Real anger, not the polite frustration I'd felt before when Derek forgot my birthday or made plans without asking me. The kind of rage that burns clean and hot and gives you clarity instead of confusion. Omar came every morning at 9, just like he'd promised. He brought fresh bread and fruit from the market, made Turkish coffee that was so strong it made my hands shake, and answered my endless questions about my mother. She loved the mornings here, he told me on that second day. We were sitting on the terrace overlooking the sea, and I was on my 3rd cup of coffee even though I knew I shouldn't be. She would wake early and walk on the beach for hours. Sometimes she would cry. Sometimes she would just stand there looking at the water. I think she was remembering Mr. Khalil. Did you know him? I asked. Khalil Hassan. Omar's face softened. Yes, madam. He was my cousin. He's the one who recommended me when Mrs. Victoria needed a caretaker for the villa. Mr. Khalil, he never stopped loving your mother. Even after she left, even after years passed with no word. He would come here sometimes and stand outside the gate, just looking at the house they'd bought together. He never entered. He said it wouldn't be right, that the villa belonged to their dreams and she should be the one to keep them alive. My throat tightened. Did he know about me? Did he ever find out he had a daughter? No, madam. Your mother never told him. And when she came back years later, after you were grown, she learned he had died. I think that broke something in her. She was never the same after that. I thought about my mother's letter, about her regret and fear. She'd run from love twice, from my father and then from Khalil. And she'd see me doing the same thing, choosing safety over passion, choosing a man who seemed stable and dependable over the uncertainty of real connection. Except Derek hadn't been safe at all. He'd been the most dangerous choice I could have made. Omar, I said, tell me about this villa. What's it worth? In current market, perhaps 8 to 10 million US dollars. Its prime location, fully renovated, historical significance. Your mother, she kept everything perfect. When she knew she was dying, she had many repairs done. New roof, new plumbing, everything. She said she wanted it ready for you. 8 to 10 million. And that was just the villa. Margaret had said the company, Chen International Holdings, was worth 42 million. Combined, I had access to $50 million. More money than I'd ever imagined having. More than enough to disappear forever if I wanted to. But I didn't want to disappear. On the third day, I finally called Margaret Rothstein. It was early evening in Alexandria, mid-morning in New York. She picked up on the first ring. Rebecca, how are you holding up? I paused, trying to find the right words. I'm processing. But I need to know what's happening there. Has Derek figured it out yet? Not yet. He's been busy playing CEO, making statements to the press, meeting with the board, reorganizing staff. He fired 3 of your mother's longtime employees yesterday, people who'd been with the company for over a decade. He's installing his own people. My jaw clenched. His own people meaning associates of his uncle's. Yes. We're documenting everything. Every fraudulent hire, every unauthorized transaction, every breach of fiduciary duty. By the time we're done, we'll have enough to bury him. What about the sale to the developer? The one owned by Michael Brennan. He's trying to rush it through. He's scheduled a meeting next week with the board to approve the sale. Of course, what he doesn't know is that he can't actually sell anything because he doesn't own anything. The board meeting is going to be very illuminating. I took a deep breath. Margaret, I want to be there. When he finds out. When everything falls apart. I want to see his face. There was a long pause. Rebecca, are you sure? It's going to be ugly. He's going to be angry, possibly dangerous. Your mother wanted you safe and far away when this happened. My mother spent her life running, I said. She ran from my father, she ran from Khalil, and she died with regrets. I'm not going to do the same thing. I need to face this. I need to face him. Margaret sighed. Your mother said you were stronger than she was. I'm starting to believe her. When do you want to come back? In 4 days. That gives Derek 1 more week to hang himself with his own rope. And it gives me time to prepare. Prepare how? I looked out at the Mediterranean, at the life my mother had built here in secret. I need to understand what I'm fighting for. Not just revenge, that's too simple. I need to understand what my mother was trying to teach me. Why she set all this up the way she did. She loved you, Margaret said quietly. Everything she did was to protect you and give you choices. Even the humiliation at the will reading, that was calculated. She knew Derek would think he'd won. She knew everyone would pity you. And she knew that would make you invisible while you figured out your next move. She made me underestimated, I said slowly, understanding clicking into place. She made everyone think I was the weak one, the one who got nothing, the one who didn't matter. Exactly. And while everyone's attention was on Derek and his triumph, you had time to escape, to learn the truth, to become dangerous. I smiled for the first time in days. I liked the sound of that. Becoming dangerous. There's something else you should know, Margaret said. Derek's been trying to access your joint bank accounts. He's drained them, about $43,000. Legally, it was his right as a joint account holder, but morally. He's stealing from me. The rage flared again, hot and clean. Add it to the list. Oh, we are. Trust me. We're documenting everything. By the time you get back, we'll have enough evidence to put him away for 10 to 15 years. His uncle too, if we can prove conspiracy. After I hung up with Margaret, I went back to the office and read through the files again. This time, I wasn't just looking at what Derek had done. I was looking at how my mother had fought back. She'd been methodical, patient, strategic. For 6 months, while dying of cancer, while everyone thought she was just trying to survive a little longer, she'd been systematically dismantling her own empire and rebuilding it somewhere Derek couldn't find it. She'd moved assets through shell companies. She'd transferred properties into trusts. She'd converted liquid investments into offshore holdings. Every move carefully documented, every transaction legal and legitimate, but so complex that it would take an army of forensic accountants to untangle it. And she'd done it all while pretending everything was normal. While sitting through family dinners with Derek, while listening to him talk about his plans for the company, while letting him think he'd successfully conned his way into her life. She'd played the long game better than he had. I found a file labeled Derek's Tells and opened it. Inside were observations my mother had made over the past 2 years, little things she'd noticed that had tipped her off to his deception. The way he checks his phone obsessively, then deletes messages immediately. Normal people don't do that unless they are hiding something. He never talks about his childhood in any specific detail. No stories about teachers, friends, actual events. Just vague generalities. Like someone who's made up a backstory instead of lived one. He mirrors too perfectly. Whatever I'm interested in, he's suddenly interested in. Whatever Rebecca loves, he loves. It's not natural. Real people have their own preferences, even in relationships. His sister Amanda calls him Derek, but once I heard her almost call him something else. Started with a D but wasn't Derek. She caught herself, but I heard it. He's too good at his job. He didn't go to business school, claims to have learned everything from his banking job, but he understands complex financial structures like someone who's been studying them for criminal purposes. My mother had been building a case against him for 2 years, and I'd never noticed. I'd been so wrapped up in my own life, my job, my marriage, my belief that everything was fine, that I'd missed all the signs. But she hadn't missed them. And she'd protected me the only way she knew how. I spent the next day walking the beach, the same beach my mother had walked every August. I tried to imagine her here with Khalil, young and in love, believing they had forever. I tried to imagine her returning years later, alone, mourning what she'd lost. And I thought about what I wanted my story to be. I didn't want to be the woman who ran. But I also didn't want to be the woman consumed by revenge. I needed something else. Something that would honor my mother's sacrifice and Khalil's love and the life I could have had if Derek had never found me. On my 5th day in Alexandria, Omar drove me into the city to meet someone. Mr. Khalil's daughter, he explained as we navigated the crowded streets. Her name is Layla Hassan. She's an architect like her father. When your mother learned that Mr. Khalil had a child, she began sending money anonymously to support Layla's education. Layla knows now that it was your mother. She wants to meet you. We pulled up to a modern building in downtown Alexandria. Inside, we took an elevator to the 7th floor, where a sign read Hassan Architecture and Design. Layla Hassan was waiting in the lobby. She was about my age, with dark hair pulled back in a loose bun and her father's kind eyes. When she saw me, she gasped softly. "You look like her," she said. "Like the pictures my father kept of Victoria." She led me back to her office, which had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. On her desk was the same photograph I'd found in my mother's letter, Khalil and Victoria on the beach, laughing. "My father never married," Layla said, sitting down across from me. "He dated sometimes, but he said no one ever compared to the woman he'd loved in his 30s. He wouldn't tell me her name. He said she was from another life, another possibility. When he died, I found this photo in his desk drawer along with letters he'd written but never sent. Letters to my mother. Yes, dozens of them. Years of letters. Telling her about his life, asking about hers, saying he forgave her for leaving, saying he hoped she was happy. Layla's eyes were wet. After he died, a lawyer contacted me. Said an anonymous donor had been funding my education, university, graduate school, even my startup costs for this firm. It was your mother. She'd been watching over me, taking care of me, because my father couldn't. I felt tears sliding down my own cheeks. She never told me about him. About any of this. I know. But before she died, she wrote to me. Told me everything. About how she'd loved my father and run from that love. About how she'd had a daughter, you, and never told him. About how she'd spent her life regretting her choices. Layla pulled out a letter and handed it to me. She asked me to give you this if you came to Alexandria. The letter was in my mother's handwriting, shaky from illness but still legible. My dearest Rebecca, if Layla is giving you this letter, then you've met your half-sister. I know that's a shock. I'm sorry I never told you about Khalil or Layla. I'm sorry for so many things. Layla is what you could have been if I'd been brave enough to stay in Egypt. She's brilliant and strong and built a life here that honors her father's legacy. I've watched her from a distance for years, helped her when I could, and wished every day that you could have known your father too. Because Khalil was your father, Rebecca. Not the man I was married to when you were born. Khalil Hassan was your biological father, and he never knew you existed. I'm telling you this now because I want you to know where you come from. You have Egyptian blood. You have roots in this ancient, beautiful country. You have family here, Layla, Omar, others who loved Khalil and would love you if they knew you. You don't have to run back to New York and the life Derek tried to build for you. You could stay here. You could build something new with Layla. You could finally be the person you were meant to be instead of the person I tried to mold you into. Or you can go back and fight. You can take everything Derek tried to steal and use it to build something better. You can honor your father's memory by being brave enough to face the truth and strong enough to reshape your life. Either way, you won't be alone. You have a sister now. And you have my love, always. Mom. I looked up at Layla, this woman who was apparently my half-sister, and I saw Khalil's kind eyes looking back at me. I saw the life I might have had, the person I might have been. Did you know? I whispered. When she was sending the money, did you know why? Not until her letter arrived 3 weeks ago, Layla said. But I think my father knew, somehow. He used to tell me I had a sister somewhere in the world. I thought he was speaking metaphorically, about human connection. Now I think he felt it. Some part of him knew he had another daughter. We sat together in silence, two sisters who'd never met, bound together by a love story that had ended before it could really begin. What will you do? Layla finally asked. Will you stay in Alexandria or go back to New York? I'm going back, I said. I have to. There's someone who needs to pay for what is done. But I looked at this woman who shared my father's face. Maybe I could come back. After it's done, maybe we could get to know each other. Layla smiled, and I saw my father's kindness in that smile. I'd like that very much. And Rebecca, whatever you're planning to do to this man who hurt you, do it with your whole heart. Don't hold back. Don't be merciful. Our father was kind, but he was also fierce when protecting what he loved. You have that fierceness in you. Use it. That night, I booked my flight back to New York. Departure, 4 days from now. Arrival, the day before Derek's board meeting, the day before his entire world would collapse. I spent my last 3 days in Alexandria walking the same streets my father had walked, swimming in the same sea where he and my mother had fallen in love. I visited his grave, a simple stone in a cemetery overlooking the Mediterranean. I sat there for hours, talking to him about everything, about my mother, about Derek, about the life I was going back to fight for. I wish I'd known you, I told the headstone. I wish Mom had been brave enough to tell you about me. But I'm going to be brave now. I'm going to fight for the life you and Mom should have had together. I'm going to make sure the man who tried to destroy me never destroys anyone else. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of salt and jasmine. And I swear I felt something, a presence, a warmth, a blessing. On my last morning, Omar drove me to the airport. Layla came too, and we held each other in the departures terminal, two sisters saying goodbye after just finding each other. Come back to us, Layla whispered. When it's done, come home. Home. Egypt was home now, in a way New York had never been. This was where I came from. This was where my story really began. But first, I had to finish the story Derek had started. The flight back to New York was 13 hours of planning. I'd called Margaret from Alexandria and told her everything I wanted to do. She'd laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Your mother would be so proud. Let's destroy him." We'd worked out the details. The timing. The witnesses. The evidence we'd present and when. By the time my plane touched down at JFK, I had a strategy that would have made my mother smile. Derek thought the board meeting would be his coronation. The moment when he sold Chen luxury properties for a fortune and disappeared with his uncle to celebrate their successful con. Instead, it would be his execution. I took a cab from JFK to a hotel in Midtown, not our apartment in Brooklyn. I wasn't ready to see him yet. Wasn't ready to pretend I didn't know what he was. I checked in under my mother's maiden name, Helena Chen, and went up to my room. The city lights sparkled outside my window, millions of people living their lives, unaware that tomorrow, one man's carefully constructed lies would crumble into dust. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram. Derek had been busy while I was gone. Posts about his new role, about honoring my mother's legacy, about exciting changes coming to the company. The comments were full of congratulations. One comment, from Michael Brennan, "Proud of you, nephew. You've earned this." Not even trying to hide it anymore. They thought they'd won. I took a screenshot of that comment. Evidence for the prosecutors. Then I did something I'd been planning since I'd read those files in Alexandria. I created a new email account, email protected, and I started writing. Not to Derek. To every person whose life he'd destroyed. To Jennifer Caldwell in Boston and Sarah Kim in Chicago. To the women his uncle had helped him con over the years. I'd found their names in the investigation files, and I'd tracked them down on social media. The email was simple. My name is Rebecca Chen Patterson. You don't know me, but we have something in common. We were all targeted by Derek Michael Brennan and his uncle Michael Brennan Sr. I'm writing to tell you that justice is coming. Tomorrow, Derek will be exposed for everything he's done. The evidence will be presented to prosecutors, and he will finally pay for his crimes. I know you've suffered. I know you felt ashamed and foolish and violated. I know because I feel all those things too. But you weren't stupid. You weren't weak. You were human, and you trusted someone who weaponized that trust. If you want to be part of making sure he never does this to anyone else, contact me at this email. There's strength in numbers, and together, we can make sure both Derek and his uncle are held accountable. You're not alone anymore. Rebecca. I sent the email to 6 women. Within an hour, 3 had responded. By midnight, all 6 had written back. Every single one of them wanted to help. Every single one of them had evidence, stories, documentation that would bury Derek even deeper. We were building an army. I fell asleep that night thinking about my mother, about how she'd spent her dying months orchestrating this moment. How she'd sacrificed her own peace to give me justice. Tomorrow, I would honor that sacrifice. Tomorrow, Derek Patterson, Derek Brennan, whatever his name was, would learn that the woman he thought was weak and broken and easy to fool was actually his worst nightmare. I'd spent 7 years being underestimated. That ended tomorrow. I woke up at dawn on the day everything would change. The hotel room was silent except for the sound of traffic far below, New York City waking up to another ordinary Thursday. But for me, for Derek, this day would be anything but ordinary. I showered and dressed carefully. A black suit my mother had bought me 2 years ago. Tailored, expensive, powerful. She'd insisted I needed at least one armor suit, as she called it. Sometimes you need clothes that remind you who you are, she'd said. At the time, I'd thought she was being dramatic. Now I understood. She'd been preparing me all along. Margaret had texted me instructions the night before. The board meeting was at 2 p.m. at Chen Luxury Properties headquarters. She'd arranged for me to have access to the building, to the boardroom, to everything. Derek had no idea I was back in New York. As far as he knew, I was still in Egypt, grieving and confused and far away from his triumph. I spent the morning meeting with the women who'd responded to my email. We gathered in a conference room Margaret had rented in a building 3 blocks from Chen Luxury Properties. Jennifer Caldwell had flown in from Boston. Sarah Kim had driven from Chicago. The other women, Michelle, Denise, Karen, and Angela, lived in the tri-state area and had been targeted by Michael Brennan SRS other associates over the years. We were a sisterhood of survivors, and together, we were going to bring down an empire built on lies. "Thank you all for coming," I said, standing at the head of the table. "I know this isn't easy. I know it means reliving trauma. But what we're going to do today will make sure Derek and his uncle never hurt anyone else." Jennifer, a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and graying hair, leaned forward. "What exactly is the plan?" Margaret stood and pulled up a presentation on the screen behind me. "Today at 2 p.m., Derek Patterson, or Derek Brennan, his real name, will present to the Chen Luxury Properties Board of Directors. He believes he's going to get approval to sell the company to a development firm owned by his uncle Michael Brennan Sr. for approximately $120 million. Sarah Kim let out a low whistle. "That's a big con." "The biggest they've ever attempted," Margaret agreed. "But what Derek doesn't know is that the company he's trying to sell is worthless. Victoria Chen spent the last 6 months of her life transferring all the real assets into a different corporate structure, one Derek has no access to. He's trying to sell an empty shell." "And that's fraud," Jennifer said, understanding dawning on her face. "Securities fraud. Wire fraud. Conspiracy." "Exactly," Margaret said. "And that's where all of you come in. Rebecca will be in the boardroom when Derek makes his presentation. When he's finished, she'll present evidence of his real identity and his pattern of fraud. Then each of you will give brief testimony about what he did to you. We'll have prosecutors standing by to make arrests immediately." Michelle, a younger woman who'd been engaged to one of Michael Brennan SRS other associates, raised her hand. "Will we have to testify in court? Because I don't know if I can face him again." "You'll likely have to give depositions," Margaret said gently. "But we'll make sure you're protected. And with the evidence we have, plus all of your testimonies combined, Derek and his uncle won't risk going to trial. They'll take plea deals." I looked at these women, at the pain and determination in their faces. "I know I'm asking a lot. But you need to understand, if we don't stop them now, they'll just move to another city and find new victims. There will be more women sitting in rooms like this, wondering how they missed the signs. We can end this today." One by one, they nodded. We were ready. At 1:30 p.m., we made our way to Chen Luxury Properties. The building was a beautiful renovated brownstone in the Flatiron district, one of the first properties my mother had acquired 30 years ago. The lobby still had her touch, elegant but welcoming, expensive but not ostentatious. I'd been here hundreds of times over the years. Every time I'd visited my mother at work, every company holiday party, every major celebration. This building had been her pride and joy. Now Derek was trying to sell it to a developer who would gut it and turn it into generic luxury condos. Over my dead body. Margaret led us to a private conference room where we'd wait. The boardroom was 1 floor up. At 1:55, she'd take me upstairs. The rest of the women would stay here with a live stream of the meeting, ready to come up when I gave the signal. "Are you ready?" Margaret asked me at 1:50. I took a deep breath. Thought about my mother. About Khalil. About Layla and Omar and the villa in Alexandria. About 7 years of lies and manipulation. About every woman Derek and his uncle had hurt. "I'm ready." We took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Margaret had her key card. She was still the company's attorney, after all, and she led me down the hallway to the boardroom. Through the glass walls, I could see the board members gathering. 12 people, most of whom had worked with my mother for decades. They looked uncomfortable, uncertain. And at the head of the table stood Derek. He looked good. That was the thing that made my stomach turn, even knowing what I knew. Seeing him in his perfectly tailored suit with his perfect hair and perfect smile, part of me still responded. 7 years of conditioning didn't disappear overnight. But then I remembered the transcripts of his phone calls with Uncle Michael. The mark is perfect. Completely trusting. And the attraction curdled into revulsion. Margaret and I waited outside until exactly 2 p.m. Then she opened the door and we walked in together. Derek's head snapped up when he saw me. His eyes widened, and for just a second, I saw panic flash across his face before he controlled it. He'd thought I was in Egypt. He'd thought I was out of the way. "Rebecca," he said, recovering quickly, plastering on a concerned smile. "You're back. I thought you were staying in Egypt longer. Is everything okay?" Every eye in the room turned to me. Patricia, my mother's former assistant who Derek had fired last week, was standing against the back wall. She smiled at me, and I saw something knowing in her eyes. She'd been one of my mother's confidants. She'd known what was coming. "Everything's fine," I said, walking around the table to stand on the opposite side from Derek. "Better than fine, actually. Margaret told me about the board meeting, and I thought I should be here. After all, this is my mother's company." "Was your mother's company," Derek corrected gently, still playing the part of the caring husband. "She left it to me, remember? I know that was difficult for you, but we talked about this. We agreed I'd handle the business side of things." "Did we?" I tilted my head. "I don't remember agreeing to anything. But you're right, let's talk about what my mother left you. Please, continue with your presentation. I'm very interested to hear about your plans." Derek glanced at the board members, clearly trying to decide how to play this. Finally, he nodded and turned back to the screen behind him, where he had a slide presentation queued up. "As I was saying before Mrs. Patterson arrived, I've been approached by Brennan Development Group with an offer to acquire Chen Luxury Properties. The offer is for $120 million, which represents a significant premium over the company's current book value. This would provide immediate liquidity and allow us all to move forward." "Move forward to what?" asked Gerald Chen, my mother's distant cousin who'd been on the board for 15 years. "Victoria spent 3 decades building this company. Why would we sell it 6 weeks after her death?" "Because the market is changing," Derek said smoothly. "Commercial real estate is facing headwinds. Interest rates are rising. This is an opportunity to maximize value before conditions deteriorate further." He clicked through slides showing market analyses, projected returns, comparisons to similar sales. It was a good presentation. Professional. Convincing. If any of it had been real. "Who exactly is Brennan Development Group?" asked another board member, Susan Martinez. "I'm not familiar with them." "They're a private equity firm specializing in urban redevelopment," Derek said. "Based here in New York. They've done several successful projects in Brooklyn and Queens. And they just happened to approach you out of the blue." Susan pressed. 6 weeks after you inherited the company." Derek's smile tightened slightly. "They've been interested in our portfolio for years. Victoria turned them down repeatedly. But I believe it's time to take a fresh look at the opportunity." "I see," I said quietly. "So they've been circling for years, and now that my mother's dead, you think it's time to give them what they want. How convenient." "Rebecca, I know you're grieving," Derek said, his voice dripping with condescension. "And I know you're upset about the will. But this is a business decision, not an emotional one. Your mother left me in charge because she trusted my judgment." "Did she?" I walked to the head of the table and placed my own folder in front of me. "That's interesting. Because I have some documents here that tell a very different story." Derek's face paled slightly. "What documents?" "Margaret, would you pull up the file marked Exhibit A?" Margaret, who'd been standing quietly by the door, moved to the laptop connected to the screen. She pulled up a scan of the first page of my mother's investigation report, The one that said subject, Derek Matthew Patterson, identity verification and background check. The boardroom went silent. "What is this?" Gerald asked, leaning forward to read the screen. "This is the report my mother commissioned from a private investigation firm 2 years ago," I said. "She hired them to look into my husband's background. Would you like to know what they found?" Derek stood abruptly. "This is inappropriate. These are private matters between a husband and wife, not something to discuss in a board meeting." "Sit down," I said, and something in my voice made him freeze. "You wanted to sell my mother's company. You wanted to conduct business. So let's conduct some business. Let's talk about who you really are." I opened my folder and began reading from the investigation report. Every eye in the room was locked on me as I detailed Derek's real identity, his criminal record, his pattern of targeting wealthy women. "Derek Michael Brennan," I said, pronouncing his real name clearly. "Born in Trenton, New Jersey. Convicted of credit card fraud and identity theft. Served 18 months in prison. Changed his name legally 6 months before he allegedly bumped into me at a charity gala." Derek's face had gone from pale to red. "This is slander. You can't prove any of this." "Actually, I can." Margaret pulled up the next exhibit, his criminal record, his name change documents, everything. "Your Honor," she said, and I realized for the first time that Judge Patricia Morrison was sitting in the back of the room. My mother's old friend, the one who'd facilitated her will. She'd been waiting, watching. "I submit this evidence for the record." Judge Morrison stood and walked to the front of the room. "Derek Michael Brennan, I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit securities fraud, and embezzlement." She nodded to 2 men in suits who'd entered quietly during my presentation. Detectives, I realized. They'd been waiting too. Everything was choreographed. Just like my mother had planned. "This is insane," Derek said, backing away from the table. "You can't do this. I inherited the company legally. Everything I've done has been legitimate. Except for the part where you stole $43,000 from our joint account," I said. "And the part where you've been embezzling from Chen luxury properties for the past year. And the part where you're trying to sell assets you don't actually own to a company run by your uncle, another convicted criminal." "My uncle?" Derek's voice went shrill. "What are you talking about?" "Michael Brennan Sr., owner of Brennan Development Group. The man you've been planning this con with since before you ever met me. Did you really think my mother wouldn't figure it out? Did you think she'd just hand you everything and die without protecting her daughter?" One of the detectives moved forward with handcuffs. Derek looked around wildly, searching for an exit, for an ally, for anything. But the boardroom was full of people who'd loved my mother, and their faces showed no sympathy. "Wait," he said, holding up his hands. "Wait. I can explain. Rebecca, please. I do love you. Everything else might have started as business, but I really do love you now. We can work this out. I'll give back the money. I'll cancel the sale. Just don't do this." I looked at him, this man I'd slept next to for 7 years, and I felt nothing but pity. "You don't know what love is," I said quietly. "And you're right about one thing, everything else did start as business. Including me. I was just a mark to you. A retirement job, isn't that what you called me?" His face crumpled. He'd forgotten about the recorded calls, forgotten that my mother had documented everything. The detectives cuffed him. Read him his rights. Started walking him toward the door. As he passed me, he leaned in and whispered, "You'll never be able to prove all of this. My uncle has lawyers. We'll fight this. And even if you win, you'll spend years in court. Years obsessing over me. I'll still own you." I smiled. "Margaret, bring in the others." The door opened, and Jennifer Caldwell walked in. Then Sarah Kim. Then Michelle, Denise, Karen, and Angela. 6 women whose lives Derek and his uncle had destroyed. 6 women who'd come to make sure it never happened again. Derek's face went white. What is this? This, I said, is what happens when you underestimate women. We compare notes. We find each other. We build cases. And we make sure men like you never hurt anyone else. Jennifer walked up to Derek and looked him straight in the eye. Remember me, David? That's what you called yourself in Boston. David Morrison. You told me you were an architect. You told me you wanted to build a life with me. You stole 2 years of my life and $300,000. Sarah was next. And I'm Sarah from Chicago, where you called yourself Derek Sanders. Investment consultant. Said you were orphaned young and I was the family you'd always wanted. You took everything from me and disappeared in the middle of the night like a coward. One by one, they confronted him. One by one, they reclaimed their power. By the time they were done, Derek was shaking. The detectives led him out, and I heard him calling for his lawyer, demanding to make a phone call, still thinking he could talk his way out of this. He couldn't. Because my mother had built an airtight case, and I'd found the courage to see it through. After Derek was gone, the boardroom erupted. Questions, shock, congratulations, disbelief. Margaret fielded them all while I stood there, feeling oddly calm. It was done. The first part, anyway. Patricia came up to me and hugged me tightly. Your mother would be so proud, she whispered. She knew you had this strength in you. She just needed to show you how to find it. Gerald approached me, his face serious. Rebecca, I think we need to discuss the company's future. It seems the assets aren't quite what we thought they were. I smiled. No, they are not. Let me explain what my mother actually did. We reconvened the board meeting, this time with me at the head of the table where Derek had stood. I explained about Chen International Holdings, about the $42 million in assets my mother had transferred there, about the offshore accounts and trusts and the legal structure she'd built to protect everything. She left me her real legacy, I said. Not just money, but a lesson about how to fight back. About how to be smarter than the people trying to hurt you. About how to protect what matters. So what happens now? Susan asked. What are you going to do with the company? I thought about Alexandria, about the villa on the Mediterranean, about Layla and the life I'd discovered there. I thought about the non-profit work I loved, about the women I'd helped over the years, about making a difference instead of just making money. I'm going to do what my mother should have done, I said. I'm going to use this wealth to help people. I'm going to convert part of the company into a foundation that helps women escape abusive situations, that provides legal services for victims of fraud, that makes sure what happened to me and Jennifer and Sarah and all the others never happens to anyone else if we can prevent it. And the rest? Gerald asked. The rest I'll manage from Alexandria, Egypt. I've discovered I have family there. Roots I never knew about. It's time I got to know them. The board voted unanimously to support my plan. By 4 p.m., I had complete control of Chen International Holdings, a clear mandate from the board, and a future that looked nothing like the life I'd imagined a week ago. But it looked like freedom. I left the building as the sun was setting, painting the New York sky in shades of pink and gold. My phone was buzzing with messages, from journalists who'd somehow already heard about Derek's arrest, from friends checking in, from the women I'd met that morning thanking me for giving them closure. And one text from Layla in Alexandria. Omar told me what happened. I'm proud to call you my sister. Come home soon. Home. Egypt was calling me home. But first, I had one more thing to do. The next morning, I woke up in the hotel room to news alerts on my phone. Derek's arrest had made the papers. Real estate heir arrested in elaborate fraud scheme, read the Times headline. Con man poses as investment banker, targets wealthy women, said the Post. Heir. They were still calling him the heir, like he'd actually earned what my mother left him. Like he hadn't stolen every opportunity he'd ever had. But the coverage would change. Margaret had scheduled a press conference for later that day where I'd tell my story. Where the other women would tell theirs. By tomorrow, Everyone would know exactly who Derek Brennan really was. I showered and dressed, this time in jeans and a sweater. Today wasn't about armor. Today was about facing the real architect of everything that had happened. Michael Brennan Sr. According to Margaret, he'd been arrested the previous evening at his office in Queens. The detectives had coordinated the arrests, Derek at 2 p.m., Michael at 6 p.m., giving Michael just enough time to hear about Derek's arrest and try to flee. They'd caught him at JFK, boarding a flight to the Cayman Islands with 2 suitcases full of cash and a fake passport. Stupid and arrogant. Just like his nephew. But I'd asked Margaret for one thing before they formally booked Michael. 1 hour to talk to him. To understand why. To look into the eyes of the man who'd orchestrated my pain and ask him how he could live with himself. The NYPD had been reluctant, but Margaret had connections, and my mother had been a major donor to several police charities. They'd agreed to give me 30 minutes in an interview room, supervised but private. I arrived at the precinct at 9 a.m. Margaret met me outside, her face concerned. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked. "He's not Derek. He's older, more experienced, more manipulative. He's going to try to get in your head." "Let him try," I said. "I need to understand how someone builds a business out of destroying people's lives. I need to hear him try to justify it." Margaret squeezed my shoulder. "Your mother faced down developers and politicians and corporate raiders for 30 years. You have her strength. Don't let him make you doubt that." A detective led me through the precinct to a small interview room. Michael Brennan Sr. sat at a metal table, his hands cuffed in front of him. He looked different from his photos, older, more tired, the expensive suits replaced with an orange jumpsuit. But his eyes were sharp and assessing as I walked in. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, his voice smooth despite the circumstances. "Or should I call you Mrs. Brennan? After all, you're family now." I sat down across from him, the detective standing by the door. "I'm not family to you. I'm the person who's going to make sure you spend the rest of your life in prison." Michael smiled. It was a cold smile, reptilian. Bold words for someone who just lost 7 years of her life to my nephew. "Tell me, Rebecca, can I call you Rebecca? How does it feel to know that every kiss, every I love you, every intimate moment you shared with Derek was part of a script I wrote?" I'd prepared myself for this. For him trying to hurt me, to make me feel small and stupid and used. But sitting across from him, seeing the cruelty in his eyes, I realized something important. He was pathetic. This man had spent his entire life conning people because he wasn't smart enough or talented enough to succeed legitimately. He'd built an empire on other people's pain because he had nothing real to offer the world. And now, at 57 years old, he was sitting in a police station in an orange jumpsuit, facing decades in prison. "I think," I said slowly, "that you're the one who should be answering questions. Because I'm looking at you, and all I see is a sad, bitter man who's wasted his entire life. You could have been anything, done anything, but you chose this." Michael's smile faltered slightly. "You don't know anything about me. I know you've been running cons since you were in your 20s. I know you've destroyed dozens of lives. I know you recruited your own nephew into this, a kid who might have had a chance at a real life if you hadn't corrupted him. I know that everything you've built is about to crumble, and you'll die in a cell with nothing and no one." "I'll be out in 5 years," Michael said confidently. "My lawyers are already working on a deal. I've been in the system before. I know how it works." "Not this time." I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. "You see this? This is a group chat with 6 women whose lives you and Derek destroyed. 6 women who are all willing to testify. And Margaret tells me once the story breaks, there will be more. Dozens more. How many women have you targeted over the years, Michael? How many lives have you ruined?" His jaw tightened. Those women were stupid. They wanted to believe in fairy tales, handsome men who'd love them forever. We gave them what they wanted. You gave them lies. Same thing. He leaned forward, chains rattling. People want to be lied to, Rebecca. They want to believe the world is kinder than it is. That love is real. That people can be trusted. We just took advantage of a market opportunity. A market opportunity. I felt rage building in my chest, hot and clean. You're talking about human beings. About trust and love and vulnerability. You weaponized the best parts of people and called it business. And your mother was any different? Michael sneered. She built her empire stepping on people, crushing competitors, doing whatever it took to win. The only difference between her and me is that society calls her success legitimate. But we're the same. We're both predators. She just had better PR. No, I said firmly. My mother built things. She created jobs, developed communities, preserved historic buildings. She added value to the world. You just take and take and take until there's nothing left. You're not a businessman. You're a parasite. Michael's face darkened. Your mother was a cold bitch who abandoned the man she loved because she was too afraid to be happy. She spent her life alone, working herself to death, and for what? So she could leave everything to you? The daughter she clearly didn't trust, since she had to manipulate you from beyond the grave to get you to wake up. The words were designed to hurt, to make me doubt my mother's love. But they didn't work. Because I'd read her letters. I'd seen the villa in Alexandria. I'd met Layla. I knew exactly how much my mother had loved me, and how much she'd sacrificed to protect me. My mother made mistakes, I said. She ran from love because she was scared. But she spent her last months on Earth fixing those mistakes. She built me an escape route. She gave me the truth. She made sure I'd have choices. What have you ever built, Michael? Besides a criminal enterprise that's about to bury you. He stared at me, and I saw something shift in his eyes. Uncertainty. Maybe even fear. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You and Derek are both going to prison. The prosecutors have enough evidence to put you away for 15 to 20 years. You'll be in your 70s when you get out, if you survive that long. Every asset you have will be seized. Every property, every account, everything. Your legacy will be a Wikipedia page about a con man who died alone and forgotten. And what's your legacy? Michael shot back. The woman who was too stupid to see what was right in front of her face for 7 years. No, I said, standing up. My legacy is that I survived you. That I was strong enough to fight back. That I took everything you tried to steal and used it to help other people. I'm going to make sure every woman you and Derek targeted gets justice. I'm going to build a foundation that helps victims of fraud rebuild their lives. And every single person who's helped by that foundation will know that their support came from the money you tried to steal. I walked to the door, then turned back. Oh, and Michael? That flight you were trying to catch to the Cayman Islands? The accounts you had there? My mother found them 2 months ago. She had them frozen and the funds transferred to the foundation I'm creating. So even your escape plan failed. You have nothing left. His face went white. That's not possible. Those accounts were untraceable. My mother was smarter than you, I said simply. She was always smarter than you. You should have picked a different family to target. I left him sitting there, chains rattling as he tried to stand, shouting something about his lawyers and appeals and how I couldn't prove anything. But his words faded as the door closed behind me. Margaret was waiting in the hallway. How do you feel? Free, I said. And I meant it. The press conference was scheduled for 2 p.m. at Margaret's law office. By the time we arrived, the conference room was packed with journalists. News crews had set up cameras. Photographers lined the back wall. Everyone wanted the story of the con man who'd infiltrated one of New York's most prominent families. But this wasn't Derek's story. This was ours. Mine and Jennifer's and Sarah's and all the other women who'd been brave enough to come forward. Margaret went first, laying out the legal case. The evidence. the charges, the expected timeline for prosecution. Then she introduced me. I stood at the podium, looking out at all those cameras, all those faces, and I thought about the woman I'd been a week ago. Small, afraid, trusting, broken. That woman was gone. My name is Rebecca Chen Patterson, I said, my voice steady. And I'm here to tell you about my husband, Derek Michael Brennan, and the elaborate fraud scheme he and his uncle have been running for over a decade. I told them everything. How Derek had changed his name and created a fake identity. How he'd targeted me specifically because of my mother's wealth. How he'd pretended to love me for 7 years while planning to steal everything. How my mother had discovered the truth and spent her dying months protecting me. My mother, Victoria Chen, was one of the strongest women I've ever known, I said, my voice catching slightly. But even she was fooled at first. Even she believed that Derek was who he claimed to be. That's how good he was at manipulation. That's how sophisticated this con was. And that's why I'm standing here today, to make sure that no one else has to go through what I went through. Jennifer spoke next, then Sarah, then the others. Each woman told her story. Each one added another layer to the picture of who Derek and Michael Brennan really were. By the time we finished, some of the journalists were crying. The cameras had captured everything, our pain, our strength, our determination to turn something horrible into something meaningful. The questions came fast after that. How had my mother figured it out? What would happen to Chen Luxury Properties? Was I filing for divorce? Would I stay in New York? I answered what I could, deflected what I couldn't. And through it all, I felt my mother's presence. She would have been proud of this moment. Proud of me for standing up, for fighting back, for refusing to be a victim. The press conference ended at 4 p.m. By 6 p.m., the story was everywhere, trending on social media, leading news broadcasts, going viral. People were sharing their own stories of fraud and manipulation. Support poured in from around the world. But the message that meant the most came from Layla. I watched the press conference online. Our father would have been so proud of you. Come home to Alexandria when you're ready. Your room is waiting. I looked out the window of Margaret's office at the New York skyline. This city had been my home for 34 years. I'd grown up here, gone to school here, built my career here. I'd fallen in love here, or thought I had. This city held every memory of my life. But it also held Derek. It held the apartment we'd shared, the streets we'd walked, the restaurants where he'd told me lies over romantic dinners. Every corner would remind me of something that had never been real. Egypt held the truth. It held my father's grave and my sister's welcome and the life my mother had been too afraid to live. I knew where I needed to be. Margaret, I said, I need you to handle something for me. I want to sell the Brooklyn apartment and donate the proceeds to the foundation. And I need you to manage Chen International Holdings from New York while I relocate to Alexandria. Margaret smiled. Already prepared the paperwork. Your mother anticipated this too. She thought you might want to start over somewhere new. Somewhere that wasn't haunted by Derek. Of course she had. My mother had thought of everything. That night, I went to our apartment, my apartment now, for the last time. I packed up my clothes, my books, my personal items. Everything else could be sold or donated. I didn't want any of Derek's things. Didn't want any furniture we'd bought together or dishes we'd eaten from or sheets we'd slept on. I wanted a clean break. As I was packing, I found a box in the back of our closet. It was full of photos, our wedding, vacations, holidays. 7 years of documented lies. I looked through them, studying Derek's face in each image. His smile never quite reached his eyes. How had I not seen it? But I knew the answer. I'd seen what I wanted to see. What I'd been trained to see. Derek had exploited my desire to believe in love, and I'd made it easy for him. I wouldn't make that mistake again. I threw the photos away. All of them. Then I walked through the apartment one last time, turning off lights, checking windows, saying goodbye to the life I'd thought I had. Tomorrow, I'd fly back to Alexandria. I'd start building something real with Layla. I'd work with Margaret to launch the foundation. I'd help other women avoid the trap I'd fallen into. But tonight, I stood in the empty apartment and let myself feel everything. The pain of betrayal. The rage at being used. The grief for 7 years I'd never get back. The shame of not seeing what was right in front of me. And then I let it all go. Because my mother had given me something more valuable than money or property. She'd given me the chance to choose who I wanted to be. Not the victim. Not the mark. Not the woman who'd been fooled. The woman who fought back. The woman who won. The woman who turned her pain into power and used that power to help others. I locked the apartment door behind me for the last time and walked out into the New York night. The city lights sparkled around me, millions of stories happening simultaneously, everyone fighting their own battles. Mine was almost over. Derek and Michael would go to trial in 6 months. They'd be convicted. Margaret was certain of it. They'd spend the next 15 to 20 years in prison, and when they got out, they'd be broken, forgotten, irrelevant. I'd be in Alexandria, building a life that would have made my father proud. Working with my sister. Swimming in the Mediterranean. Walking the same beaches where my parents had fallen in love. Living the life my mother had been too afraid to live. That was the best revenge. Not destroying Derek, though I'd done that too. The best revenge was being happy. Being free. Being the person I was meant to be all along. I took a cab to JFK that night instead of waiting until morning. I couldn't spend another night in this city. Couldn't breathe this air anymore. I needed to go home. And home was Alexandria. The plane touched down in Cairo at sunset, the sky painted in deep oranges and purples that made the desert glow like it was lit from within. I'd been gone for less than 2 weeks, but it felt like a lifetime. The woman who'd left New York was different from the woman returning to Egypt. Stronger. Clearer. Free. Omar was waiting for me at arrivals, holding the same sign with my name on it. When he saw me, his face broke into a smile. Welcome home, Miss Rebecca. Home. Yes. That's what this was now. How's Layla? I asked as he took my suitcase. Excited. She's been preparing for your return. She has many plans to show you Alexandria, to introduce you to family, he paused, looking embarrassed. I'm sorry. I'm speaking too much. You must be tired. No, I said, surprising myself. I'm not tired. I'm ready. For all of it. We drove through Cairo as night fell, the city transforming into something magical, lights everywhere, the smell of spices and smoke and life. Then north to Alexandria, and with every kilometer, I felt lighter. Like I was shedding the weight of Derek and the lies and the 7 years I'd lost. By the time we reached the villa, it was nearly midnight. But Layla was waiting on the front steps, and when I got out of the car, she ran to me and hugged me tight. Sister, she whispered. You're home. We stayed up until dawn that first night, sitting on the terrace overlooking the Mediterranean, drinking mint tea and talking about everything. I told her about the press conference, about confronting Michael Brennan, about my decision to leave New York permanently. She told me about our father, stories I'd never heard, memories I'd never had. How he'd been kind but fierce. How he believed in building things that lasted. How he taught her that architecture wasn't just about structures, but about creating spaces where people could live their best lives. He would have been so proud of you, Layla said as the sun started to rise over the water. What you did, standing up to those men, protecting other women, choosing to build something good from something terrible. That's exactly who he was. I wish I'd known him, I said for the 100th time. You do know him, Layla said gently. His in you. His courage, his sense of justice, his belief in doing what's right even when it's hard. Our mother gave you life, but our father gave you your soul. Over the next few weeks, I settled into Alexandria. Layla helped me hire a staff for the villa, a cook, a housekeeper, a gardener. Omar remained the caretaker, but he became so much more than that. He became a friend, a protector, a connection to the father I'd never met. I spent my mornings walking on the beach where my parents had fallen in love. I'd think about my mother, about the choices she'd made, about the regrets she'd carried. And I'd promise her that I wouldn't make the same mistakes. That I'd be braver. That I'd build the life she'd wanted but been too afraid to claim. My afternoons were spent working with Margaret via video calls, setting up the foundation. We called it the Victoria Chen Foundation for Survivors of Financial Fraud. It would provide legal services, counseling, financial assistance, and support groups for people who'd been targeted by con artists. Jennifer Caldwell agreed to serve on the board. So did Sarah Kim. We recruited other experts, psychologists who specialized in manipulation tactics, financial advisors who could help victims rebuild, lawyers who'd prosecute fraudsters. Within a month, we'd helped 5 women escape situations similar to mine. Within 2 months, we'd filed suits against 3 other con artists operating in the Northeast. Within 3 months, we'd become known as the organization that actually helped, that actually made a difference. And the funding? That came from my inheritance, the $42 million my mother had hidden from Derek. I set up an endowment that would ensure the foundation could operate in perpetuity. My mother's legacy wouldn't be a real estate empire. It would be the women we helped, the lives we saved, the families we protected. Derek's trial was set for September. Margaret called me in late August to discuss whether I'd testify in person or via video link. I need to be there, I said immediately. I need to look at him one more time and let him see what he failed to destroy. So in mid-September, I flew back to New York. Layla came with me. You shouldn't face this alone, she'd insisted. Family supports family. The courthouse was in Lower Manhattan, an imposing stone building that seemed designed to make you feel small. But I didn't feel small anymore. I felt powerful. Derek looked diminished when they brought him into the courtroom. He'd lost weight, his expensive suits replaced with a cheap dress shirt and slacks his public defender had probably bought him. His hair was longer, unkempt. His eyes darted around the room nervously until they landed on me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. I tried to find something in his face, remorse, recognition, humanity. But there was nothing. Just calculation. He was probably already planning his next con, the lies he'd tell to try to get a reduced sentence. I testified for 3 hours. I told the jury everything, how we'd met, how he'd courted me, how he'd isolated me from friends who might have seen through him, how he'd convinced my mother to give him a job, how he'd embezzled funds, how he'd planned to sell the company and disappear. The prosecutor showed the jury Derek's phone calls with Michael Brennan. Played the recordings where Derek called me the Mark and laughed about how trusting I was. Showed them the evidence of his previous cons, the other women he'd hurt. Jennifer testified. Sarah testified. 4 other women who'd come forward testified. By the time we were done, there wasn't a dry eye in the jury box. Derek's lawyer tried to paint him as a victim himself, a young man corrupted by his uncle, someone who'd made mistakes but could be rehabilitated. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Derek got 18 years. Michael Brennan Sr., whose trial happened simultaneously in another courtroom, got 23. Neither would be eligible for parole until they'd served at least 12 years. Derek was 41 now. He'd be 53 when he got out, if he survived prison. Michael would be 80. An old man, broken and forgotten. After the sentencing, reporters crowded around me outside the courthouse. They wanted a statement, a reaction, a sound bite about justice and revenge and closure. I don't feel vengeful, I told them honestly. I feel sad. Sad that 2 men wasted their lives hurting people instead of building something meaningful. Sad that they'll spend years in prison when they could have used their intelligence and charm for good instead of evil. But mostly, I feel grateful. Grateful, one reporter asked, confused. Grateful that my mother loved me enough to save me. Grateful that I had the strength to fight back. Grateful that I found my sister and discovered where I really come from. Grateful that I get to spend the rest of my life helping people instead of being one of the people who needs help. That sound bite went viral. People shared it across social media with comments like, "This is what strength looks like," and she turned her pain into purpose. But I wasn't trying to be inspirational. I was just telling the truth. Layla and I flew back to Alexandria the next day. As the plane climbed above New York, I looked down at the city one last time. Somewhere down there was the apartment I'd shared with Derek. The Chen Luxury Properties building where my mother had built her empire. The non-profit where I'd worked for years, trying to make a small difference. That life was over now. I'd never be that Rebecca again, the one who believed people were fundamentally good, who trusted easily, who wanted so badly to be loved that she ignored every red flag. But I wouldn't trade this hard-won wisdom for anything. Because now I knew what real love looked like. It looked like my mother spending her dying months protecting me. It looked like Layla welcoming a stranger as a sister. It looked like Omar caring for a villa for 12 years because he'd promised my father he would. It looked like Jennifer and Sarah and all the other women who'd shared their pain to help me build something better. Love wasn't romance or grand gestures or perfect wedding photos. Love was sacrifice and truth and showing up when things got hard. Back in Alexandria, I threw myself into building a life that felt real. Layla and I started collaborating on projects. She'd design affordable housing developments, and the foundation would help fund them. We were creating spaces where women escaping abusive situations could start fresh, surrounded by beauty and support. I learned Arabic. Slowly, painfully, but I learned. I wanted to talk to our father's extended family in their own language, to understand the culture I came from. Omar was patient, teaching me phrases and correcting my terrible pronunciation with gentle humor. I made friends in the expat community and the local business community. I joined a book club. I learned to cook Egyptian food. I swam in the Mediterranean every morning, sometimes with Layla, sometimes alone. And slowly, without meaning to, I started to heal. 6 months after Derek's sentencing, I was having dinner with Layla at a restaurant near the waterfront when a man approached our table. He was maybe 40, tall and lean with kind eyes and a warm smile. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said in English, "but are you Rebecca Chen? The woman who started the Fraud Survivor Foundation?" I tensed automatically, still not entirely comfortable with my newfound notoriety. "Yes, that's me. My sister was helped by your foundation last month. She'd been targeted by a con artist, lost everything. Your lawyers helped her get some of her money back, and your counselors helped her understand it wasn't her fault." His eyes were wet. "You saved her life. She was suicidal before she found you. I just wanted to say thank you." He shook my hand and walked away before I could respond. I sat there, stunned, as Layla smiled at me knowingly. "That's why you did all this," she said. "Not for revenge. For that. For the people you're saving." She was right. Somewhere along the way, this had stopped being about Derek and started being about something bigger. About breaking cycles of abuse and manipulation. About giving people second chances. About turning my mother's wealth into something that actually mattered. That night, I went to my father's grave. I did this once a week now, talking to him about my life, my work, my fears and hopes. The cemetery was quiet except for the sound of waves from the nearby shore. "I think I understand now why Mom ran," I told the headstone. "It wasn't because she didn't love you. It was because she loved you so much it terrified her. She'd been hurt before, and she couldn't risk being hurt again. So she chose safety over happiness, control over love. And she regretted it every day for the rest of her life." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of jasmine and salt. "But I'm not going to make that mistake. I'm going to live the life you and Mom should have had. I'm going to be brave enough to love again, when the time comes. I'm going to trust again, carefully but genuinely. Because that's what you would have wanted for me. Not to let Derek destroy my capacity for connection. Not to let fear win." I stayed there until the stars came out, feeling my father's presence, my mother's love, and my own growing strength. 3 months later, the Victoria Chen Foundation celebrated its first anniversary. We'd helped over 200 women and men escape fraudulent situations. We'd successfully prosecuted 12 con artists. We'd recovered over $8 million for victims. The anniversary gala was held at the villa in Alexandria. We invited everyone who'd helped, the lawyers, the counselors, the board members, and most importantly, the survivors. Jennifer flew in from Boston. Sarah came from Chicago. Michelle, Denise, Karen, and Angela came from various parts of the country. We stood on the terrace where my mother had mourned her lost love for 12 years, and we celebrated what we'd built from that loss. We told stories, we cried, we laughed, and we promised each other that we'd keep fighting for everyone who needed us. To Victoria, Margaret said, raising her glass, who taught us that the best revenge is living well and helping others do the same. To Victoria, we all echoed. And I felt my mother smile. 2 years after my mother's death, I woke up in the villa in Alexandria to sunlight streaming through my bedroom windows and the sound of waves against the shore. I lay there for a moment, taking inventory of my life. I was 36 years old. Divorced, the paperwork had been finalized a year ago, though Derek had contested everything from prison, trying to claim he deserved half of our assets. He got nothing. Single. Living in Egypt. Running a foundation that had helped over 500 people in 2 years. Sister to Layla, who was becoming one of my closest friends. Daughter of 2 people who'd loved each other but never got their happy ending. And slowly, carefully, learning to be happy. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. Board meeting at 2 p.m. NY time. Video link ready. I smiled. The foundation had grown so much that we now had offices in 3 cities, New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. We were planning expansions to Miami and Seattle. Margaret handled most of the day-to-day operations from New York, but I remained active on the board, participating in major decisions and fundraising. The work was fulfilling in a way my old non-profit job had never been. Because I'd lived through what our clients were experiencing. I knew the shame and the self-doubt and the rage. I knew what it felt like to realize you'd been manipulated by someone you trusted. And I knew how hard it was to rebuild after that kind of betrayal. So when I talked to our clients, when I told them it wasn't their fault, when I promised them they'd survive this, they believed me. Because I was living proof. After my morning swim and breakfast on the terrace, Omar still brought fresh bread and fruit every day, and would share Turkish coffee while discussing whatever book he was reading. I settled into my office for the board meeting. Margaret appeared on screen, professional as always. Good morning, Rebecca. Or should I say good afternoon? I never can keep the time zones straight. Morning here, afternoon there, I said. What's on the agenda? Several things. First, we've been approached by a documentary filmmaker. She wants to do a series about financial fraud and manipulation. Wants to feature your story prominently. Thoughts? I considered it. 2 years ago, I would have said no immediately. The idea of reliving everything on camera, of having my pain entertainment for viewers, would have felt wrong. But now, what's the angle? I asked. Education and prevention. She wants to show how sophisticated these cons are. How anyone can be targeted, how to recognize the warning signs. She's interviewed several psychologists who specialize in manipulation tactics. It would be very comprehensive. And the other survivors? Jennifer, Sarah, the others? Would they be included? She's already reached out to them. They're on board if you are. They said you inspired them to speak out the first time, and they'd do it again if it helped more people. I thought about the man in the restaurant who'd thanked me for saving his sister. About the emails I received every week from people who'd escaped dangerous situations because of the foundation's work. About my mother and what she would want. Tell her yes, I said. But I want editorial approval on anything involving my mother. Her story deserves to be told with respect. Done. We moved through the rest of the agenda. Budget reports, new hires, upcoming events. The foundation was thriving, growing beyond what I'd ever imagined. My mother's $42 million had been invested wisely, generating returns that funded our operations while preserving the principal. We'd be able to do this work for generations. After the meeting ended, I went to find Layla. She was at her office in downtown Alexandria, but we'd planned to have lunch together. I drove myself now, something that had terrified me at first, navigating Egyptian traffic, but I'd learned. Just like I'd learned Arabic and how to haggle at the market and which restaurants had the best koshari. I'd learned how to live here. Layla's office was in a building our father had designed 30 years ago. She'd pointed this out the first time she'd brought me here, pride evident in her voice. The building was beautiful, modern but with traditional elements, lots of light and open space. Just like Layla was designing now, influenced by our father's philosophy that buildings should serve people, not the other way around. We ate at a small restaurant near the Corniche, the waterfront road that curved along the Mediterranean. The sea was brilliant blue, dotted with fishing boats and pleasure craft. Tourists walked past speaking a dozen different languages. Street vendors sold fresh juice and grilled corn. "I have something to tell you," Layla said as we waited for our food. I looked up, catching something in her tone. "What is it?" She smiled, shy and excited. "I'm getting married. His name is Karim. He's an engineer I've been working with on the affordable housing project. We've been dating for 6 months, and he asked me last week." Joy flooded through me. "Layla, that's wonderful. Why didn't you tell me you were seeing someone?" "I wanted to be sure," she said. "After watching what happened to you with Derek, I was careful. I took my time. I made sure he was real. And he is." "He is," she said firmly. "He's kind and honest and he loves me for who I am, not for what he can get from me. His family knows my family. I've met his mother, his sisters, his grandmother. He's not hiding anything." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm so happy for you. Our father would be thrilled." "Our mother too," Layla said. "Your mother, I mean. She would have wanted you to see that not all love is a lie, that it's possible to find something real." Would my mother have wanted that for me? I thought about the letters she'd left, about her regrets and her warnings. She'd wanted me to be careful, yes, to be smart. But ultimately, she'd wanted me to be brave, to not let fear control my choices the way it had controlled hers. "When's the wedding?" I asked. 6 months. We're doing it traditionally, big celebration, families coming from all over. And Rebecca. She squeezed my hand. "I want you to be my maid of honor. You're my sister. You belong at my side." I felt tears prick my eyes. 2 years ago, I'd been alone, betrayed, broken. Now I had a sister who wanted me at her wedding. A family I'd never known existed. A life that felt real and solid and mine. "I'd be honored," I whispered. That evening, I went to the beach below the villa. This was my thinking spot, the place I came when I needed to process emotions or make decisions. The sun was setting, painting the sky in those same shades of orange and purple that had greeted me when I'd first returned to Egypt. I thought about the past 2 years. About everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. About Derek, who was probably sitting in a cell right now, still thinking he'd been the smartest person in the room. About Michael Brennan, who'd spent his whole life taking from others and would die with nothing. About my mother, who'd sacrificed her own happiness to protect mine. About my father, who'd loved a woman he'd only had for 1 summer but never stopped waiting for her. About Layla, who'd welcomed a stranger as a sister because family mattered more than genetics. About Jennifer and Sarah and all the other women who'd turned their pain into purpose. And about me. Rebecca Chen Patterson. Daughter of Victoria and Khalil. Sister to Layla. Founder of a foundation that mattered. Woman who'd been broken and rebuilt herself stronger. My phone rang. Unknown number. New York area code. I almost didn't answer, probably a reporter or someone wanting money. But something made me pick up. Rebecca. It's Amanda. Derek's sister. Well, not really his sister, I guess you know that now. I froze. I hadn't heard from Amanda since before the trial. She testified against Derek, admitting she wasn't actually his sister but rather another associate of Michael Brennan's who'd been paid to play a role. She'd taken a plea deal, gotten probation and community service. What do you want? I asked coldly. I wanted to apologize. For real this time, not in court with lawyers telling me what to say. I wanted you to know that I never thought it would go as far as it did. I thought it was just, I don't know, a job. I didn't think about you as a real person with real feelings. And that was wrong. That was really, really wrong. I walked along the beach, the waves lapping at my feet. You helped him lie to me for 7 years, Amanda. Or whatever your real name is. It's Sophie. Sophie Brennan. I'm Michael's daughter. His daughter. God, the whole thing had been a family business. Why are you calling me, Sophie? Because I saw what you built. The foundation. I've been following the news about it, and I want to help. I know that sounds crazy. I know you have no reason to trust me. But I understand how these cons work. I grew up watching my father manipulate people. I could help train your counselors, help identify warning signs, help victims understand the psychology of what happened to them. I stopped walking. You want to work for the foundation? The foundation that exists because of what your family did to me. I want to do something good with what I know, Sophie said quietly. My father destroyed so many lives, and I helped him. I can't undo that. But maybe I can prevent it from happening to someone else. Maybe I can take all the manipulation tactics he taught me and use them to help people recognize when they're being targeted. I thought about my mother, about how she turned her regret into action, about how I'd turned my pain into purpose, about forgiveness and redemption and whether people could really change. I'll think about it, I said finally. Send me an email. Explain your qualifications, what you think you could offer. Margaret will vet you thoroughly, background checks, psychological evaluation, everything. And if we decide to move forward, it would be on a trial basis. One mistake, one lie, and you're out. Thank you, Sophie breathed. Thank you for even considering it. After we hung up, I stood there watching the sunset and thinking about how complicated people were. How someone could be both victim and perpetrator. How sometimes the people who'd been part of your destruction could become part of your healing. I didn't know if I'd hire Sophie. But I was willing to listen. That felt like growth. The next few months passed in a blur of activity. Layla's wedding preparations. The documentary filming, which was harder than I'd expected, reliving those memories on camera, but also cathartic in a way. Expansion plans for the foundation. And slowly, cautiously, training Sophie Brennan to be a consultant for our educational programs. She was good at it. Uncomfortably good. She could break down manipulation tactics with clinical precision, could explain exactly how her father and Derek had operated. The survivors found her credible because she'd been part of it. She wasn't judging them, she was acknowledging her own complicity while helping them understand the mechanics of the con. It was strange having her involved. Sometimes I'd see her teaching a workshop or counseling a client, and I'd feel rage bubble up. This woman had pretended to be Derek's sister, had come to family dinners and holidays, had helped maintain the lie that had stolen 7 years of my life. But then I'd remember that she'd also been trapped. Raised by Michael Brennan to believe that conning people was legitimate work. She'd taken the plea deal and cooperated with prosecutors. She'd served her time. And now she was genuinely trying to make amends. Forgiveness was complicated. But maybe that was okay. Maybe you could help someone rebuild their life while still being angry about what they'd taken from yours. Layla's wedding was in April, when Alexandria was perfect. Warm but not hot, the city in bloom, the Mediterranean sparkling. The ceremony was traditional, beautiful, full of family I was still getting to know. Cousins and aunts and uncles who'd loved my father and who welcomed me as one of their own. I stood beside Layla as she married Karim, and I watched her face glow with happiness, and I thought about my mother and father. They should have had this. They should have stood together and made promises and built a life. But their loss had given me this, a sister, a family, a home. Maybe that was how healing worked. You couldn't undo the past, but you could build something new from the ruins. During the reception, Omar found me standing alone on the terrace, looking out at the sea. He dressed up for the occasion, and he looked dignified and happy. "Miss Rebecca," he said, "I have something for you. I've been waiting for the right moment to give it to you." He handed me an envelope, yellowed with age. On the front, in handwriting I didn't recognize, "For my daughter, if I have one." "What is this?" "A letter from your father," Omar said gently. "He wrote it 27 years ago, after your mother left. He asked me to keep it safe, to give it to his child if he ever had one and something happened to him. When I learned about you, I knew it was time." My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in English, my father's handwriting careful and precise. "My dearest child, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've discovered I existed. I'm writing this in the hope that someday, Victoria will tell you about me. That you'll know you had a father who loved you before you were even born. Your mother came to me in the summer of 1998 and told me she was pregnant. I was overjoyed. I wanted to marry her immediately, to build a life together here in Alexandria or in New York or anywhere she wanted. But she was afraid. I understood that fear. She'd been hurt before, and trusting someone new was terrifying. She left without telling me her decision. I waited for weeks, hoping she'd come back or call or write. But there was only silence. Eventually, I had to accept that she'd chosen to raise you alone. I want you to know that I never blamed her. I never stopped loving her. And I never stopped hoping that someday I'd meet you. If you're reading this, then that didn't happen. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't there to watch you grow up, to teach you things, to be the father you deserved. But please know that I loved you. I loved the idea of you. The possibility of you. I hope your mother gave you a good life. I hope you're happy and healthy and strong. I hope you're brave enough to love completely, without the fear that held your mother back. I hope you build beautiful things and help people and find joy in unexpected places. You're half Egyptian. That means you have the blood of pharaohs and poets, of survivors and dreamers. You come from an ancient, proud people who have endured for thousands of years. Never forget that heritage. And never forget that you were wanted. So wanted. If you ever come to Alexandria, go to the Corniche at sunset. That's where your mother and I used to walk. That's where I fell in love with her. Stand there and look at the Mediterranean, and know that your father stood in that same spot dreaming of you. I love you, my child. I always will. Your father, Khalil Hassan. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Omar stood beside me silently, giving me space to feel everything. My father had loved me before I was born. He'd written to me across time, across death, to make sure I knew I'd been wanted. That I'd mattered. Thank you, I finally whispered to Omar. Thank you for keeping this safe for me. Your father was my cousin, but he was more than that. He was my friend. My brother. He made me promise that if he had a child, I would make sure that child knew they were loved. I've kept that promise. That night, after the wedding celebration wound down, I drove to the Corniche. I stood at the railing, looking out at the Mediterranean under the stars, and I felt my father's presence so strongly it was like he was standing beside me. I'm here, Dad, I whispered to the darkness. I came to Alexandria. I found the villa, and Layla, and Omar. I learned about you and Mom. I know now that I was wanted, that I was loved. The wind picked up, warm and salt-scented, carrying the voice of ancient Egypt. I'm living the life you and Mom should have had together. I'm being brave enough to love, to trust, to build something meaningful. I'm helping people the way you helped people with your architecture, by creating spaces where they can heal and grow and become who they are meant to be. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the view, the dark sea, the lights of the city reflected in the water, the stars overhead. Then I posted it to the Foundation's social media account with a caption. This is where my parents fell in love 30 years ago. My mother ran from that love because she was afraid. My father waited for her, but she never came back. They both died with regrets. I'm standing here tonight to tell you that fear is not worth it. Whatever you're running from, love, truth, the hard work of healing, turn around and face it. Life is too short for regrets. People are too precious to lose. If you've been hurt by someone you trusted, don't let that hurt define you. Don't let it make you afraid of ever trusting again. Be smart, be careful, but be brave. That's what my parents would want. That's what I'm learning to do. Be brave. The post went viral overnight. Thousands of people shared it, commented on it, sent messages about their own fears and how they were choosing courage. By morning, it had been picked up by news outlets, featured on morning shows, turned into memes and graphics and inspirational quotes. But what mattered wasn't the attention. What mattered was the message. The truth I'd learned through pain and rebuilt myself to understand. Love was worth the risk. Truth was worth the difficulty. Healing was worth the work. 3 months after Layla's wedding, I was sitting in my office at the villa, reviewing applications for the Foundation's new training program, when Margaret called with unexpected news. You need to see this, she said, and sent me a link. It was an article from the New York Times. Real estate con man dies in prison. Derek was dead. I clicked through to read the full article. Heart attack. Age 43. Found unresponsive in his cell at Rikers Island. No foul play suspected. I sat there staring at the screen, waiting to feel something. Relief. Satisfaction. Closure. But all I felt was sad. Sad that a man had wasted his entire life hurting people. Sad that he died in prison, alone and forgotten, having never built anything real or meaningful. Sad that his last thoughts were probably still about the cons he'd lost, not about the humanity he'd wasted. I didn't go to his funeral. I didn't need to. That chapter of my life had closed 2 years ago, when I testified at his trial and watched him get sentenced. His death was just a footnote. But I did write something. An essay for the Foundation's newsletter, about grief and closure and the difference between justice and revenge. When I learned my ex-husband had died, I expected to feel triumphant. He tried to destroy me, and instead, I'd built something beautiful from the ruins of his deception. Shouldn't I feel victorious? But I didn't. I felt sad for the life he wasted. Sad that he never learned that real fulfillment comes from giving, not taking. Sad that he died without ever understanding love or connection or purpose. His death doesn't give me closure. I found that 2 years ago, when I chose to use my pain to help others. When I chose to be brave instead of bitter. When I chose to build instead of destroy. If you're waiting for your abuser or manipulator to die or suffer before you can heal, I have news for you. Their fate is irrelevant to your recovery. Healing happens when you decide you're worth more than the lies you were told. When you choose to believe in your own value regardless of what they did or didn't do. Don't wait for their ending to write yours. You're the author of your own story. Make it a good one. The essay resonated with thousands of people. I got emails and messages from survivors who'd been waiting for their abusers to face consequences before they could move on. My words helped them understand that they could choose healing regardless of whether justice was served. That felt more meaningful than Derek's death. That felt like real closure. As summer turned to fall, I found myself thinking about the future. I was 36 years old. I had a life I loved, work that mattered, a sister who'd become my best friend. I had a home in Alexandria and connections in New York. I had my mother's strength and my father's kindness, and I'd forged them into something uniquely mine. But I was also lonely sometimes. Not lonely in the way I'd been with Derek, where I'd been surrounded by lies. Lonely in a more honest way, The loneliness of someone who'd built a good life and wondered if they might want to share it with someone. Layla noticed. Of course she did. You should date, she said one evening as we walked along the Corniche. You've healed. You're ready. I don't know if I'll ever be ready to trust someone like that again, I admitted. You don't have to trust immediately, Layla said. You just have to be open to the possibility. Let someone take you to dinner. Have a conversation. See where it goes. You're too young to be alone forever because of what one terrible man did. She was right. I was letting Derek's ghost control my future, and that was another kind of con, the one I was running on myself. So I said yes when Omar's nephew, Tarek, asked me to coffee. And I said yes when the documentary filmmaker, Maya, invited me to lunch. And I said yes when my Arabic tutor's brother, Ahmed, suggested we visit a museum together. None of them turned into romance. But they reminded me that I could talk to people, trust them in small ways, enjoy their company without constantly looking for the catch. That felt like progress. And then, in November, 2 years and 8 months after my mother's death, I met someone who made me think maybe I could try again. His name was Dr. James Wilson. He was an American psychologist who'd contacted the foundation about developing training programs. He flew to Alexandria to meet with me and our team, and over the course of 3 days of meetings, I found myself drawn to him in a way I hadn't been drawn to anyone since Derek. But this was different. James was honest about his life, his divorce 5 years ago, his 2 teenage kids who lived with their mother in Boston, his struggles with trust after his ex-wife had cheated on him. He was open about his flaws, his mistakes, his regrets. He didn't try to present a perfect version of himself. And he listened. Really listened. When I talked about the foundation's work, he asked thoughtful questions. When I mentioned Derek, he didn't try to fix me or tell me to move on. He just acknowledged that betrayal leaves scars. On his last night in Alexandria, we had dinner at a restaurant overlooking the Mediterranean. The conversation flowed easily, and somewhere between the appetizers and dessert, I realized I was actually having fun. Not performing or protecting myself or analyzing every word for hidden meaning. Just enjoying someone's company. Can I ask you something? James said as we were leaving. And please know you can absolutely say no, but would you be open to staying in touch? Maybe video calls, emails, seeing where things go. My first instinct was to say no. To protect myself. To keep my walls up and my distance safe. But then I thought about my mother, dying with regrets because she'd run from love. About my father, writing letters to a daughter he'd never meet because the woman he loved had been too afraid. About the essay I'd written telling survivors not to let their abusers control their future stories. I'd like that, I said. But I need to be honest with you. I'm not good at trust anymore. I'm going to be cautious and probably frustrating. I'm going to need a lot of time and patience. James smiled. I have plenty of both. And Rebecca. I'm not good at trust anymore either. We can figure it out together. Slowly. Slowly. That sounded manageable. Over the next 6 months, James and I talked almost every day. Video calls where we'd discuss the foundation's work, his research, life in Boston versus life in Alexandria. He came to visit twice more, each time staying a little longer. I flew to Boston once to meet his kids, terrifying, but they were kind and funny and clearly loved their dad. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I'd panic, when I'd see some innocent action and interpret it as manipulation. Times when James would mention something and I'd immediately start looking for the lie. But each time, I'd catch myself. I'd breathe. I'd remember that James had given me no reason to doubt him. That he'd been consistent, honest, transparent. And slowly, so slowly, I started to trust again. We didn't rush anything. No grand declarations of love. No plans to move in together or blend our lives. Just 2 people who'd both been hurt, both been betrayed, learning to be vulnerable again. On the 3rd anniversary of my mother's death, I went to the cemetery where my father was buried. I brought flowers, jasmine and roses, my mother's favorites. I sat by his grave and told him about everything that had happened. I met someone, Dad. His name is James. I don't know if it'll work out. We're taking it one day at a time. But I'm trying. I'm being brave enough to risk getting hurt again because the alternative is being alone forever, and that's not living. That's just existing. Mom gave me the tools to survive. You gave me the courage to hope. Together, you created someone who can be both strong and vulnerable. Someone who can fight when necessary and love when possible. I miss you both. Every day. But I'm living the life you wanted for me. I'm helping people. I'm building something meaningful. I'm being brave. I stood to leave, and as I turned, I saw someone standing at a distance. A woman, maybe in her 60s, well-dressed, watching me with tears in her eyes. She approached slowly. Rebecca. Rebecca Chen. Yes. I'm Eleanor Brennan. Michael Brennan's ex-wife. Derek's aunt. I tensed immediately. What do you want? Just to say I'm sorry, she said quietly. I divorced Michael 15 years ago when I discovered what he was doing. I couldn't stop him. He's too manipulative, too connected. But I've been following your foundation's work. It's extraordinary. You took something horrible and turned it into something that helps people. That takes incredible strength. I studied her face, looking for deception, for an angle. But all I saw was genuine regret. Why are you here? I asked. Because Michael is my responsibility too. I married him. I brought Derek into this world, even if I'm not his mother. I didn't do enough to stop what was happening. And I wanted you to know that not everyone in that family is corrupt. Some of us tried to be different. I thought about Sophie, about how she'd been trying to rebuild her life and help others. About how complicated family loyalty could be. About grace and forgiveness and second chances. Thank you for saying that, I finally said. And for what it's worth, your daughter Sophie is doing good work with the foundation. She's genuinely helping people. Eleanor's eyes lit up. You hired her. After everything. She earned it. She's doing the work to make amends. That's all anyone can do. We stood there for a moment, two women connected by the men who tried to destroy me, finding unexpected common ground. Your father's grave is beautiful, Eleanor said, looking at the headstone. And your mother, Victoria, she was an extraordinary woman. I only met her once, at some business function, but she impressed me. She would be so proud of you. After Eleanor left, I sat down again by my father's grave and thought about all the ways people were connected. How Derek's betrayal had led me to my father's love. How Michael's con had inspired the foundation that was now helping hundreds of people. How even people from the family that had hurt me could become allies in healing. Life was complicated. People were complicated. But maybe that complexity was what made moments of genuine connection so precious. That evening, I video called James. He was in his office at Boston University, between classes, looking tired but happy to see me. How are you? He asked. Good, I said. And I meant it. Really good. I went to my father's grave today. Met Derek's aunt, long story. And I've been thinking. About us. About taking the next step. I think I'm ready to try more. If you are. James's face broke into a smile. I've been ready. But I was waiting for you to be sure. I'm not completely sure, I admitted. I don't know if I'll ever be completely sure about anything again. But I'm sure enough. I'm brave enough. And I think that's all we need to start. Then let's start, James said simply. 3 months later, James moved to Alexandria. Not into the villa, we weren't ready for that. But to an apartment nearby. He'd arranged a visiting professorship at Alexandria University and would split his time between research and working with the foundation. We dated like normal people. Dinners and walks on the beach and movie nights. Getting to know each other's rhythms and quirks and boundaries. It was slow and sometimes awkward and nothing like the whirlwind romance I'd had with Derek. It was real. And real was what I needed. On the 4th anniversary of my mother's death, the foundation held a gala in New York. We'd helped over 1,000 people by then. Prosecuted 23 fraudsters. Recovered millions of dollars. Changed laws in 3 states. I stood at the podium in a ballroom full of survivors, supporters, donors, and staff. Margaret sat in the front row, beaming. Jennifer and Sarah were there. Sophie Brennan was there, now the Foundation's Director of Education. Eleanor Brennan had even come, making a substantial donation in her ex-husband's name, money he'd hidden from the government, now being used to undo his damage. Layla had flown in from Alexandria with Kareem. She was 5 months pregnant with their first child, my niece or nephew. The next generation, born into a family that had learned to choose love over fear. And James stood in the back, giving me an encouraging smile. 4 years ago, I stood in a different room and discovered that everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. My husband wasn't who he claimed to be. My mother had left me what everyone thought was nothing, just a crumpled paper bag and a plane ticket. But that ticket led me to the truth. It led me to my father's legacy, to a sister I didn't know I had, to an understanding of love that my mother wanted me to learn. She taught me that real love isn't perfect or easy. It's messy and complicated, and sometimes it comes disguised as loss. My mother gave up her own happiness because she was afraid. She died with regrets. But she also died knowing she'd given me the tools to make different choices. To be braver than she was. To build something meaningful from pain. This foundation is her real legacy. Not the buildings or the money or the company, the people we've helped. The lives we've saved. The message we're sending that manipulation and betrayal don't have to define you. If you're here tonight because someone hurt you, betrayed you, tried to destroy you, I want you to know something. They failed. You're still standing. You're still fighting. You're still capable of trust and love and hope. Don't let them take your future just because they corrupted your past. Don't let fear make your decisions. Don't die with regrets. Be brave. Choose love. Build something beautiful. That's what my mother taught me. That's what my father would have wanted. That's what I'm choosing every single day. And if I can do it, after everything I've been through, so can you. The room erupted in applause. People were crying, hugging, sharing their own stories of survival and strength. In that moment, surrounded by people who transformed their pain into power, I felt my mother's presence so strongly it was like she was standing beside me. I did it, Mom, I whispered. I was brave. I chose love. I built something beautiful. Just like you wanted. That night, after the gala ended and everyone had gone home, I sat in my hotel room overlooking Central Park. Not the Brooklyn apartment where I'd lived with Derek, not the penthouse he'd thought he'd inherit, but neutral ground. New ground. James was there, sitting quietly on the couch, giving me space to process. I'm ready to go home, I said. To Alexandria. Yes. Home is Alexandria now. Home is the villa and Layla and the foundation's work and the Mediterranean. Home is where my parents fell in love and where I learned who I really am. I'm coming with you, James said. It wasn't a question. I know. We flew back to Egypt the next day. As the plane descended toward Cairo, I looked out the window at the ancient land below, the desert and the Nile and the cities that had stood for thousands of years. This was my country too. My heritage. My home. Omar was waiting at the airport with his familiar sign, Rebecca Chen Patterson. But this time, when I walked toward him, James was beside me. And I wasn't alone anymore. Not really. I had a sister and a partner and a purpose. I had a foundation that mattered and work that helped people. I had my mother's strength and my father's kindness and my own hard-won wisdom. I had survived betrayal and discovered truth. I had faced my worst fear, that I'd been a fool, that I'd wasted years, that I'd never trust again, and I'd proven it wrong. I was Rebecca Chen, daughter of Victoria and Khalil. sister to Layla, founder of something meaningful, woman who'd been broken and rebuilt herself stronger than before. And I was finally, completely, home. 5 years after my mother's death, I stood on the terrace of the villa in Alexandria, watching the sunset paint the Mediterranean in impossible colors. The foundation had expanded to 12 cities across 3 countries. We'd helped over 5,000 people. We'd changed lives. My phone buzzed with a text from Layla. She's here. £7, 4 ounces. Come meet your niece. I grabbed my keys and ran to the car. James was already there, waiting. We drove to the hospital through streets I'd come to know like my own heartbeat. Layla was exhausted but radiant when we walked into her room. Karim sat beside her, tears streaming down his face. And in her arms was a tiny, perfect baby girl. Rebecca, Layla said, meet Khalila Victoria Hassan. Named for our father and your mother. The 2 people who loved each other but never got their happy ending. I took my niece in my arms, this tiny human who represented everything my parents had wanted but never had together. She opened her eyes, Khalil's kind eyes, and looked at me like she knew me. Hello, Khalila, I whispered. Welcome to the family. You're going to have such a good life. You're going to be brave and strong and loved. You're going to know exactly where you come from and who you are. And you're never going to have to wonder if you were wanted. I looked up at Layla, at James, at Karim, at this family I'd built from the ruins of betrayal. And I understood, finally, what my mother had been trying to teach me all along. Love wasn't about perfection or certainty or guaranteed happy endings. Love was about showing up. About being brave enough to try even after being hurt. About building something real instead of settling for something pretty but hollow. My mother and father never got their happy ending. But they got this, a daughter who'd learned from their mistakes, who'd found her sister, who'd built a life that honored their memory. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. Thank you for watching this story. If you made it this far, you understand now why that single plane ticket changed everything. My mother's gift wasn't money. It was truth. The truth about who I'd married, who I really was, and where I truly belonged. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe and check the description box below for more stories like this. Stories about women who refused to stay broken, who turned their pain into power, and who proved that the best revenge is living well. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and whether you've ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal. You're not alone. None of us are. Be brave. Choose love. Build something beautiful. That's what my mother taught me. That's what I'm teaching you.